5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Happy 2000!
The world has said this aggression would not stand.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow.
The nomination of my small step for man.
Landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the earth.
But old soldiers never die.
A date will live in infamy.
I consider myself the luckiest man on the face of the earth.
The 20th century was unlike any before it, marked by a unique journey. Innovation surged forward, marked by both triumphs and setbacks. As technology progressed, so did humanity's capacity for destruction. Aviation played a pivotal role in the 20th century's urgent pursuit of peace. The outcome of World War I would decide which European powers would endure. With stakes rising, wartime aviation grew increasingly critical. Fighters evolved from modest scout planes, romanticized in myth, but formidable in reality. Meanwhile, far away in the frontier town of Seattle, wealthy young entrepreneur William E. Boeing was pursuing his passion for flight. Fueled by a fascination with airplanes and a sharp eye for opportunity, he aimed to craft a superior flying machine. The B&W, named after its co-creators Boeing and Navy engineer Conrad Westervelt, debuted on June 15, 1916. Though not a commercial hit, the B&W firmly established Boeing as an aircraft manufacturer. By 1917, the fledgling Boeing Airplane Company consisted of 28 individuals, a mix of carpenters, seamstresses, engineers, and pilots. As the war advanced, American sentiment increasingly opposed Kaiser Germany. The United States joined the fight alongside Britain and France. Boeing shifted focus to the war effort, creating the Model C. The aircraft impressed the Navy so much that Boeing secured a contract for 50 trainers. World War I ended on November 11, 1918. From its aftermath emerged communism in Russia and fascism in Germany, and fascism in Germany. With peace came the abrupt cancellation of government airplane contracts. A surplus of warplanes flooded the civilian market, leaving Boeing struggling to survive. To stay afloat, the company diversified, producing furniture and speedboats. Yet, Bill Boeing never wavered in his optimism for aviation's future. His vision centered on airmail service.
First international airmail service on the North American continent.
In 1919, Eddie Hubbard and I took a flight up to Vancouver, BC. On our return trip, the postmaster at Vancouver handed us a mail sack for delivery to the postmaster at Seattle. This was the first international mail ever carried by plane into the United States.
A venture that showcased the immense potential of air transport for the U.S. mail. Donald Willis Douglas also emerged as a key figure among early aviation pioneers. An MIT-trained engineer, Douglas designed the MB-1 bomber for the Martin Airplane Company. Despite the post-war economic downturn, Douglas launched his own company, determined to succeed. With financial support from businessman David R. Davis, Douglas created the Cloudster, aiming to achieve the first non-stop coast-to-coast flight. Although it lost that race, the Cloudster made history as the first airplane capable of carrying more weight in passengers and cargo than its own. Douglas soon secured a contract to produce torpedo bombers for the U.S. Navy. The DT-1 and DT-2 cemented Douglas as a reliable Navy contractor. In July 1921, Douglas formally incorporated his company under his own name. Both Douglas and Boeing were on paths to success. As Europe struggled to recover from World War I, the United States ascended as the dominant global power. It was an era of unbridled prosperity, brimming with hope and creativity in the arts and sciences. The era concluded with the world grappling to recover from the most severe economic disaster in history. Amid the turmoil, dictators rose to power, threatening global peace, while aviation made monumental advancements. The Boeing Airplane Company was still striving to define its post-war role. Using a captured German Fokker D-7 as inspiration, the company developed an all-metal fuselage and created the PW-9 fighter for the Army. This success positioned Boeing as the leader in fighter aircraft for over a decade. Meanwhile, Douglas achieved its own milestone with the World Cruiser. Two modified DT-2 biplanes completed the first round-the-world flight in under 6 months. This historic feat earned Douglas its motto, "First around the world," sparking public enthusiasm for global air travel. On May 20th, 1927, Charles Lindbergh achieved another aviation milestone, becoming the first person to fly non-stop across the Atlantic in a modified Ryan monoplane. On the same day Charles Lindbergh embarked on his historic flight, Boeing made a quiet milestone of its own. The Model 40A took to the skies, marking Boeing's entry into the passenger business by carrying 2 people along with cargo. With the Model 40A, Boeing secured the contract to deliver U.S. mail on the Chicago to San Francisco route. To support this operation, the company established airfields, staffed maintenance facilities, and trained pilots. The effort led to the creation of Boeing Air Transport to oversee the integration. Across the country, these pioneering airmail services were laying the groundwork for modern aviation. The rising popularity of passenger flight led to the creation of the Model 80, a 12-passenger tri-motor biplane specifically designed for passenger service. The Model 80 also introduced flight attendants, revolutionizing the airline industry. Boeing was steadily gaining traction in the passenger market while solidifying its position in military aviation. The F-48 P-12 fighter, first flown in 1928, featured bolted aluminum tubing in its structure, representing the most significant advancement in fighter planes since the Great War. By 1929, Boeing Air Transport had provided Bill Boeing with the expertise to build an aviation empire, the United Aircraft and Transport Corporation. This new enterprise brought together 11 companies, including airplane, engine, and propeller manufacturers, along with airlines, to deliver seamless coast-to-coast passenger and airmail service. As Boeing's venture expanded, the nearly decade-long growth of the American economy came to an abrupt halt. The nation plunged into a global depression, leaving nearly 27% of its workforce unemployed. Despite these challenging times, the aviation industry soared. Passenger air travel remained the privilege of the wealthy, who were insulated from the economic struggles below. At Douglas's Santa Monica factory, workers produced the renowned Dolphin amphibian aircraft. On the military front, Douglas consistently delivered flying boats, observation planes, trainers, and scout planes. In 1934, rising anti-business sentiment prompted Congress to enact trust-busting legislation. The new laws barred airplane manufacturers from holding airmail contracts and prohibited airline operators from building airplanes. The impact was profound. Antitrust legislation led to the breakup of Boeing's United Aircraft and Transport Corporation into three distinct companies: United Airlines, United Aircraft, and the Boeing Airplane Company, which included Stearman operations in Wichita, Kansas. North American Aviation shed its financial ties to Douglas and several airlines, transforming into an aircraft manufacturing company. Dutch Kindleberger, the renowned chief engineer at Douglas, assumed leadership of North American Aviation and relocated it to California in 1935. The company's first product line consisted of trainers built for the Army. Disheartened by the changes, Bill Boeing sold his shares and exited the industry he had pioneered. Meanwhile, passenger demand for faster air travel continued to grow. Biplanes had reached their design limits, prompting a shift in focus to monoplanes. Boeing's first monoplane, the XP-9 fighter, set the stage for the company's revolutionary design of the sleek, low-wing monomail, built to carry both passengers and mail. The pinnacle of this monoplane evolution was the Model 247, the first all-metal plane with retractable landing gear, and the first truly modern passenger aircraft. The 247 outpaced its nearest competitor by 80 miles per hour, achieving speeds of 200 miles per hour. Boeing was poised to dominate the passenger airline market, but then made one of the most significant missteps in aviation history. At that time, United Airlines was still part of Bill Boeing's expansive enterprise, and the first 70 model 247s were promised to United. Transcontinental and Western Air, later known as TWA, was told to wait. Determined not to let United dominate the skies, TWA's CEO, Jack Fry, turned to Douglas, awarding them a contract for a twin-engine design. The DC-1 prototype was larger, faster, and could carry more passengers than Boeing's 247. The production model, the DC-2, surpassed its predecessor in both speed and capacity. It quickly became the passenger plane of choice for airlines worldwide. With demand for fighter planes waning and the passenger market slipping away, Boeing was in need of a new direction. In 1933, legendary Boeing engineer Claire Egvet became the company's chairman and president. He set a course for larger Boeing aircraft, focusing on big bombers and passenger planes designed to leverage shared design breakthroughs. This decision would have a lasting impact during the war years ahead. The Army Air Corps became Boeing's first major military customer. In 1934, the Army Air Corps sought a heavy, long-range, experimental bomber. Boeing responded with the four-engine XB-15, a metallic condor featuring an unprecedented 149-foot wingspan. At the same time, Boeing used its own funds to develop a prototype of the four-engine B-17 Flying Fortress, which combined the best features from the 247 and XB-15 designs. In 1935, Douglas took flight with its own groundbreaking innovation. The DC-3 became an instant success, cementing Douglas's dominance in the passenger market. Overnight, it became the must-have aircraft for airlines worldwide. The twin-engine DC-3 was faster, more reliable, and could carry more passengers than any previous aircraft. With its superior economics, Douglas revolutionized the airline industry, ensuring affordable and profitable air travel. In 1938, Boeing incorporated big bomber features into two new passenger models. The Model 307 Stratoliner sparked its own revolution, becoming the first passenger plane with a pressurized cabin, enabling it to fly above the weather at 20,000 feet. The four-engine Model 314 Clipper flying boat, the largest passenger transport of its time, followed suit. However, neither the Clipper nor the Stratoliner could dislodge the DC-3's dominance in the passenger market. Meanwhile, in 1937 and 1938, the rising storm of Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan sweeping through Austria, Czechoslovakia, and Manchuria cast a chilling shadow over the world. In peaceful contrast, the gateway city of St. Louis became the backdrop for a new aviation giant as it taxied onto the industry runway. James S. McDonnell founded the McDonnell Aircraft Corporation at Lambert Field, a bustling airline hub. However, the company's first aircraft, the Bat prototype, wouldn't take flight until 1944. Destiny, however, would soon reshape McDonnell's ambitions. The world stood on the edge of war. On September 1st, 1939, Hitler invaded Poland, pushing Europe to the brink. 2 days later, on September 3rd, Great Britain and France declared war on Germany. The Second World War of the century had begun. By 1941, France had surrendered. England stood as an island under siege, surrounded by a Nazi-controlled continent, and the Soviet Union was in retreat. Then came Pearl Harbor. On December 7th, 1941, 360 aircraft from the Japanese Imperial Navy attacked, thrusting the United States into the global conflict. The outlook seemed grim. America mobilized, focusing on building air power and training pilots. Almost every pilot from the early days of the war trained on two key aircraft, the North American Texan and the Boeing Cadet. Boeing went on high alert, constructing burlap houses and chicken wire lawns to camouflage its B-17 production plant. Under the camouflage mesh, B-17 production surged as thousands of women, known as Rosie the Riveter, filled the gap left by men who had gone to war. The B-17 became a legend in the skies over Europe, proving it could endure heavy damage and still bring its crews home safely. With the development of a long-range bomber escort, the relentless attacks from enemy fighters began to ease. The North American P-51 Mustang could outperform any fighter in World War II, saving countless lives among the B-17 crews. Flying in tandem, the B-17 Flying Fortress and the P-51 Mustang helped cripple Nazi war production. On D-Day, June 6, 1944, the Allied forces invaded France. The C-47, a military version of the DC-3, filled the skies over Normandy. By the end of the day, 20,000 paratroopers and their equipment had crossed the English Channel in the largest airlift the world had ever seen. North American aviation was in the Pacific early in the war, deploying the first bomber in all World War II combat theaters. The B-25 Mitchell medium bomber was the first to strike the heart of Imperial Japan in a surprise and daring raid led by Lieutenant Colonel Jimmy Doolittle.
What happened was the airplane flying our landing beacon, which we badly needed to home on, and other fuel for us and so forth, unfortunately crashed. All aboard were killed. And so when we began to plaintively call, turn on the beacon, there was no beacon.
So people went their separate ways?
We just went to where we got as close to as we could to where we thought we wanted to go. One plane, against orders, went to Vladivostok. And they were kept until the war was almost over, and then were permitted to escape. And the humorous thing about this was that the Secretary of the Treasury, I believe it was Morgenthau, was it not? Mm-hmm. He called me in once a month, very regularly, and just gave me a terrible going over. He had just received another bill from the Russians for the food and lodging of the 5 people that they were taking care of for us.
How many boys did not return from that mission? How many died on the mission?
There were 2 people drowned when we landed. 4 were executed by the Japanese. 1 jumped and was killed when he jumped. His parachute was available. We don't know what happened. So there were 7.
Douglas proved its worth in the Pacific with the dauntless dive bomber. In the pivotal Battle of Midway, Navy Dauntless bombers sank 4 enemy aircraft carriers. From that turning point, Japan fought the rest of the war in retreat. The 2 most significant wartime programs, the Manhattan Project to develop the atomic bomb and the B-29 that would deliver it, were conducted in complete secrecy. The B-29 Superfortress pushed the design limits of propeller-driven aircraft flying higher and faster than enemy fighters. On its wings, the war's end was carried to Japan. The overwhelming superiority in both the quality and quantity of American war material ultimately tipped the scales of the conflict. The number of planes produced for the war effort was staggering. By 1944, Boeing was producing an astonishing 362 B-17s per month. Between 1944 and 1945, Douglas built nearly 30,000 airplanes, while North American aviation produced over 40,000. When the final chapter on World War II is written, it may very well conclude that the American worker stood side by side with combat troops to save the world from tyranny.
In the next half century, People will see as well as hear around the world. Newspapers, magazines, mail, and messages will be sent through the air at lightning speed and reproduced in the home.
For the World War II generation, anything seemed possible in the post-war years. Communism surged in Eastern Europe. The shadow of nuclear arms loomed over an uneasy peace. Technology became the battleground of the Cold War, and jets became America's primary deterrence. For the aviation industry, employment once again became the cost of peace. At Boeing, attorney William M. Allen reluctantly took control as plant closures echoed through the company. Bill Allen made his mark as a shrewd risk-taker with a radical new design, the swept-wing B-47 Stratojet. The newly formed U.S. Strategic Air Command needed a bomber capable of outrunning prop-driven fighters and early jets. Using captured German wind tunnel data as a guide, Boeing designed a swept-back wing for improved aerodynamics. To reduce the risk of fire spreading to the fuel in the wings, Boeing placed the engines on pods beneath them. Boeing's next major bomber, the B-52, became the backbone of the U.S. bomber fleet and remains in service today. Boeing also perfected aerial refueling technology and developed the flying boom, a key advancement in air-to-air fueling. McDonnell Aircraft Company found its niche in jet fighters. Early in the war, McDonnell had tasked his engineers with researching jet technology and was ready in 1943 when the Navy requested a jet fighter. The risk paid off. The FH-1 Phantom became the first carrier-based jet. McDonnell's rise was propelled by a series of legendary jets, including the F-2H Banshee, the F-3H Demon, and the F-101 Voodoo. North American aviation engineers also utilized captured German wind tunnel data to develop America's first swept-wing fighter. The F-86 Sabrejet became one of the most iconic fighters of all time during the Korean conflict, achieving a kill ratio of 10 enemy aircraft for every 1 lost. With the Sabrejet, North American aviation dominated jet fighters in the early 1950s. North American aviation followed up with the F-100 Super Sabre, the first operational fighter to routinely fly at supersonic speeds. By the late 1950s, McDonnell had captured the jet fighter crown with the F-4 Phantom II supersonic fighter. The F-4 gave the country one of the most versatile fighter jets ever conceived. It performed in a wide range of missions as an interceptor, fighter-bomber, and reconnaissance plane in the U.S. Navy, Marines, and Air Force. Once in service, it set speed and altitude records. The F-4 served the country in Vietnam and the Gulf War and is still in service with the air forces of several nations. From the captured German data, engineers at Douglas developed a line of tactical aircraft, starting with the Delta Wing F-4D Skyray and the A-4 Skyhawk attack plane. 3,000 A-4s served the United States Navy and Marine Corps, becoming one of the finest aircraft ever designed. And in passenger aircraft, Douglas soared. In the immediate post-war years, Douglas competed against itself in a market glutted with surplus cargo planes converted for passenger use. However, with falling fares and economic prosperity, air travel took off. Douglas and Boeing developed new models for the booming market. Douglas introduced the DC-6, while Boeing created the Model 377 Stratocruiser. Douglas won another round and continued its outstanding DC series track record with the world's airlines. The next round would be fought in the jet stream. For the first time in history, the world was brought together with images from television. A Soviet satellite, missiles in Cuba, a fallen leader, and a faraway war. Around the world, people were brought closer together by jet transportation. Just as J.S. McDonald had used risky technology to propel his company's rise in the fighter market, Bill Allen would apply jet technology to ascend in the commercial airline market. Allen effectively bet the Boeing company on modern jet travel, launching it with the Dash 80 prototype, drawing on the company's experience in building large jet bombers. On July 15, 1954, the 38th anniversary of Boeing, modern jet travel was ushered in with the Dash 80. Donald Douglas had been reluctant to invest in improving passenger jet technology until the Dash 80 first flew. This would prove to be as serious a mistake as the 247 misstep Boeing had made in the 1930s. With Boeing already out of the gate with the Dash 80, Douglas announced plans to build a slightly larger DC-8 to carry more passengers. With the bitter taste of the 247 defeat still fresh in its memory, Boeing retooled, building the Dash 80 just slightly wider than the DC-8. The Boeing 707 was born. For the first time since the 247, Boeing competed for airline business on equal footing, winning orders for 20 airplanes from Pan American Airways in 1955. The DC-8 entered service in 1959, with United and Delta Airlines setting records for speed, cargo, capacity, and range. But the 707 had made serious inroads on the Douglas turf, proving the economics of jet travel to the world's airlines. With speeds approaching the sound barrier, one 707 could carry as many passengers a year as the Queen Mary, using only 1/10 the fuel. As passenger demand grew, markets evolved, and so did jetliner models. The three-engine Boeing 727 was developed to take off and land at smaller airports with shorter runways. The Douglas DC-9 and the Boeing 737 answered the demand for airplanes to carry fewer passengers on shorter routes. Hoping to regain market dominance, Douglas flew the DC-9 a full 2 years ahead of the Boeing 737. Time would help Boeing with this round, as the 737 went on to become the best-selling passenger jet of all time. The giant Boeing 747 jumbo jet started as an interim jetliner to be converted to cargo use when supersonic planes came into service. Instead, the Boeing 747 became the queen of the skies, stitching continents together with its large capacity, carrying more passengers than any airplane ever built. By 1966, the startup and production costs for all these new jetliner models were becoming unpredictably high for both Boeing and Douglas. At Douglas, resources were strained, and the company sought a merger partner. McDonnell Aircraft won. And together, as McDonnell Douglas, the company launched the versatile DC-10 wide-body jetliner to compete with the Boeing 747 jumbo jet. Through it all, competition between Boeing and Douglas made commercial aviation fast and affordable, transforming travel on a worldwide scale. During the 1950s and 1960s, the Cold War gained momentum. National pride and national security were at stake in a race for technological superiority. Both sides turned to developing nuclear missiles for deterrence when bombers became vulnerable to missile interceptors. America's missile industry has its roots in World War II. Douglas gained valuable experience throughout the 1940s by winning contracts for missile systems such as the Nike and Thor missiles in the 1950s. The intermediate-range Thor missile held the line of nuclear deterrence until long-range missiles were developed. North American Aviation, studying the German V-2 rockets, integrated its research into every aspect of rocketry: guidance, propulsion, electronics, and production. In 1953, the company's Navajo missile flew, and the Redstone rocket engine produced by Rocketdyne became a hallmark of innovation. Meanwhile, Boeing's rocket research was focused on pioneering supersonic propulsion, and the Bookmark air defense missile, capable of reaching Mach 2 speeds, was a significant achievement. Boeing produced 420 launch systems and 700 missiles, gaining crucial mass production and large-scale integration experience that would be essential in countering the Soviet challenge. Then, on October 4th, 1957, Americans were stunned when the Soviet Union successfully launched Sputnik 1, a 184-pound satellite, into orbit. This event was a blow to the American psyche, which had long been accustomed to technological superiority.
Speed of progress in the satellite project cannot be taken as an index of our progress in ballistic missile work. Our satellite program has never been conducted as a race with other nations.
For the military, it was alarming, as it suggested a new and potent long-range missile threat from the Soviet Union. The launch of Sputnik ignited the space race, fueled the arms race, and further intensified the Cold War. In response to the Soviet threat, Boeing leveraged its expertise in large-scale integration to create the Minuteman intercontinental ballistic missile system. This complex missile system, consisting of 1,000 three-stage Minuteman missiles, along with large silos and control rooms, was built to serve as a key component in America's nuclear deterrence strategy. In 1962, the Soviet Union, under Nikita Khrushchev, attempted to place intermediate-range ballistic missiles in Cuba, threatening the security of the continental United States. This led to a tense confrontation during the Cuban Missile Crisis, where a nuclear war was narrowly avoided through a blockade of Cuba and the eventual removal of the Soviet missiles. The peace was secured largely through a credible nuclear deterrence force composed of 800 B-47s, 500 B-52s, and 12 operational Minuteman missiles, backed by a determined U.S. president. Meanwhile, North American Aviation had solidified its reputation for innovation, launching the X-15 in 1959. This hypersonic research platform, capable of reaching altitudes of 50 miles and speeds exceeding 4,000 miles per hour, tested extremes in speed, altitude, and human response, making invaluable contributions to the space program. NASA's drive to regain the high frontier of space was further propelled when it awarded McDonnell Aircraft Company the contract to build America's first manned spacecraft, marking a new era in space exploration. The Mercury space program marked a pivotal moment in human space exploration, with astronauts embarking on 6 successful missions to study the effects of space on the human body. McDonnell Aircraft Company, having built the Mercury capsules, quickly moved on to develop the two-man Gemini spacecraft. Over the course of 10 missions, Gemini astronauts conducted America's first spacewalks and docking maneuvers, gaining crucial experience in preparation for a moon landing. The Apollo program took this momentum to new heights, embodying the national spirit of determination that had propelled the U.S. through World War II. Apollo was one of the most complex engineering endeavors ever attempted, requiring extraordinary cooperation among 27 major contractors, a level of collaboration reminiscent of wartime efforts. However, in 1967, a tragic accident occurred when a fire during a pre-launch test took the lives of 3 U.S. astronauts. In response, NASA turned to Boeing for technical integration and evaluation of the Apollo program. Bill Allen, Boeing's president, showed his commitment to the nation's space efforts by lending Boeing's top engineers to the program, even at the expense of its own development projects, including the supersonic transport, the 747, and the 737. Both Boeing and McDonnell Douglas played major roles in the Apollo program and the development of the Saturn V rocket, which would ultimately send astronauts to the moon. North American Aviation, a key player in the U.S. space program, contributed immensely to the success of the Apollo missions, providing the rocket engines for all 3 stages of the Saturn V, the complete second stage, and the Apollo Command and Service Module. This support was crucial in the successful launch of the Apollo 11 mission on July 16, 1969, which saw Neil Armstrong, Edwin Aldrin, and Michael Collins lift off towards the moon. On July 20, 1969, the lunar module Eagle touched down on the moon at 4:17 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, marking a monumental victory for America in the space race.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. Rocket Tranquility, we copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot. One, high up, please. Prepare.
However, as the 1970s began, the national mood shifted. The U.S. economy fell into a recession, and the oil crisis of the early 1970s brought double-digit inflation, forcing the country to confront limitations on its way of life. Boeing, mirroring these economic troubles, faced a series of challenges stemming from the high costs of programs initiated in the 1960s. The government canceled the supersonic transport program due to concerns over cost and environmental impact. Meanwhile, the Apollo program wound down, and the 747 and 737, despite their eventual success, had accumulated significant startup costs. Additionally, rising fuel prices and declining passenger revenue led to a drying up of commercial jet orders. In response to these challenges, newly appointed Boeing CEO T. Wilson implemented drastic measures to save the company, focusing on cost-cutting, strategic restructuring, and efforts to reignite growth in the competitive aerospace and commercial aviation markets. The company cut its workforce nearly in half and shifted focus toward high-tech ventures, including computer services, rapid transit systems, hydrofoils, and other innovative technologies. Boeing also relied on its defense and space divisions to stay afloat, with significant projects like the Short-Range Attack Missile, the Air-Launched Cruise Missile, and the Mariner 10 probe, which was launched to Venus in 1973. Additionally, Boeing's Airborne Warning and Control System, AWACS, made its debut in 1976, further solidifying its position in defense technology. McDonnell Douglas faced similar challenges during this period. with the decline of the Apollo program and the downturn in the airline industry. The company also had to cut its workforce and diversify its operations. However, it found strength in the fighter jet market. In 1972, McDonnell Douglas first flew the F-15 Eagle, an advanced air superiority fighter for the U.S. Air Force. Then, in 1975, the Navy awarded McDonnell Douglas the contract for the FA-18 Hornet, a versatile fighter plane that would become a key component of the U.S. Navy's fleet. In 1980, McDonnell Douglas continued to expand its capabilities by partnering with British Aerospace and the AV-8B Harrier II. The company's diversification was also marked by its 1967 merger with Rockwell Standard, though its core experts remained in rocket propulsion. North American Aviation's legacy in space technology continued when it was selected to build the Space Shuttle, cementing its position as a key player in the space race.
5, 4, we've gone for main engine start.
Go. Roger, roll.
As the 1980s began, the United States saw economic recovery from the 1970s oil crisis. The Cold War reached its peak in the early part of the decade, but ultimately ended with the collapse of communism in the Soviet Union by the decade's end. During this period, the aviation industry faced the challenges of developing fuel-efficient and quieter aircraft, driven by the economic pressures from the oil crisis and the demand for sustainability. Boeing responded with the development of the 757 and the 767, two fuel-efficient airplanes that became workhorses for global airlines. The 757, a standard-body jet, and the 767, a larger twin-aisle design, were introduced concurrently in the early 1980s and allowed airlines to efficiently serve almost any route around the world. In the 1980s, McDonnell Douglas focused on producing the fuel-efficient MD-80 series, which became a cornerstone of its new line of jetliners. Meanwhile, at Rockwell, the B-1 bomber program was revived as Cold War tensions escalated. The B-1B was redesigned for low-altitude, high-speed penetration of enemy air defenses, making it a vital asset for U.S. military operations during the 1980s and beyond. Partnerships became a major trend in the defense and aerospace industry in the 1980s, with several companies joining forces on complex programs. Boeing teamed with Rockwell on the B-1B, with Northrop on the B-2 stealth bomber, with Bell Helicopter Textron on the V-22 Osprey tilt-rotor aircraft, and with Lockheed on the F-22 Raptor stealth fighter. In space, Rockwell played a pivotal role in the Space Shuttle program. Between 1972 and 1991, Rockwell was responsible for building 6 shuttle orbiters and also designed the shuttle's main engines. This period marked the peak of the Space Shuttle's operational life, and Rockwell's involvement was crucial to the success of the program. Throughout the late 1980s and early 1990s, McDonnell Douglas continued to innovate and refine its products. The Delta rocket series, in particular, gained a reputation as one of the world's most reliable launch vehicles, reinforcing the company's stature in space and satellite launches. In the defense sector, McDonnell Douglas also improved the AH-64 Apache attack helicopter, a product of its acquisition of Hughes helicopters. The Apache Longbow, with its advanced avionics and weaponry, became the U.S. Army's primary attack helicopter. Boeing, through the purchase of Vertol, made significant strides in helicopter technology. Vertol, a pioneer in tandem rotor aircraft, gave Boeing a solid foundation in producing heavy-lift helicopters like the CH-46 Sea Knight and the CH-47 Chinook, which played vital roles in military and rescue operations, especially during the Vietnam War. The legacy of Douglas in cargo aircraft was also maintained with the C-17 Globemaster III, being a modern-day workhorse. Designed to operate from nearly any airfield, it provides critical logistical support during conflicts and humanitarian missions alike, ensuring rapid response to global emergencies. As the 1990s began, the aviation industry faced increasing pressure to innovate while cutting costs. Boeing responded by embracing a strategy of cost reduction without sacrificing quality. The result was the 777, a revolutionary aircraft that became the world's largest twin jet and the first to be designed entirely using computer-aided design, or CAD. The 777's introduction set a new standard for precision and efficiency in jetliner manufacturing, becoming the benchmark for future commercial aircraft. The fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989 marked a profound shift in global geopolitics, signaling the end of the Cold War and ushering in a new era of international cooperation and competition. As the 20th century drew to a close, Boeing, a leader in both commercial aviation and defense, reflected the spirit of progress in the aerospace industry. In 1989, Boeing jets carried 675 million passengers, a testament to the advancements made since the Wright brothers' first flight. In the realm of space, Boeing played a pivotal role in the International Space Station, or ISS project, coordinating the efforts of 16 nations to build the largest scientific endeavor ever undertaken. The ISS, a symbol of international collaboration, continues to orbit the Earth as a testament to what humanity can achieve when it works together toward a common goal. Meanwhile, as the 1990s progressed, the world faced new challenges. In the Persian Gulf, Boeing, McDonnell Douglas, and Rockwell products helped secure victory in the Gulf War, with their planes, helicopters, missiles, and other technologies proving decisive in saving countless lives and demonstrating superior air power. This period of conflict underscored the importance of technological innovation in modern warfare, an area where Boeing had a significant stake. The late 20th century saw further consolidation in the aerospace and defense industry, with Boeing acquiring Rockwell's aerospace and defense business in December 1996. In 1997, Boeing merged with McDonnell Douglas, strengthening its position as the world's foremost aerospace company. At the dawn of the new millennium, Boeing had transformed from a company born out of necessity during a world at war to the undisputed leader in aerospace. The knowledge, experience, and innovations accumulated over the previous century positioned Boeing to continue shaping the future of aviation and space exploration, extending humanity's reach beyond the Earth's atmosphere and into the cosmos.
In 1952, Boeing took a huge gamble by developing a prototype jet transport aircraft, risking more than the company's entire net worth on the project. Had the new aircraft failed, it could have led to the company's downfall. However, the 707 family ultimately became one of the greatest success stories in the history of air travel. On May 15, 1954, the Boeing 367-80, now famously known as the Dash 80, was unveiled to an enthusiastic crowd of employees and guests. Despite the setbacks the British had faced with the jet-powered de Havilland Comet, interest in Boeing's project remained strong. Everyone present understood the significance of the event, though few realized they were witnessing the debut of one of the most important aircraft ever built. The Dash 80 was designed as a one-of-a-kind prototype to demonstrate the viability of jet-powered transportation. Drawing on their experience with jet bombers, Boeing's engineers created an entirely new aircraft. Featuring a wing with a 35-degree sweep similar to military jets, but far more rigid. The wing flaps were divided to prevent interference from engine exhaust. Two sets of ailerons were installed, one for high-speed cruising and the other for takeoff and landing. The Dash 80 featured a tricycle undercarriage, with two sets of main wheels that retracted into the fuselage and a double nose wheel. Powered by 4 Pratt & Whitney JT3 turbojets, which were the civilian counterparts of the engines used in the B-52, these engines were mounted in individual pods positioned below and ahead of the wings. This configuration not only improved weight distribution, but also made maintenance easier. The hinged side panels of the nacelles provided convenient access to the entire engine. Taxiing trials started almost immediately. But on May the 22nd, the Dash 80 encountered an issue when its port undercarriage collapsed. While the structural damage was minimal, the incident delayed the test program by 6 weeks for repairs. The Dash 80 measured 127 feet in length, with a wingspan of nearly 130 feet. Its cockpit was designed to hold a pilot, co-pilot and navigator, but the cabin did not feature standard passenger seating. As a purpose-built experimental aircraft, it had very few refinements. The fuselage interior was virtually bare and featured few cabin windows. Boeing had invested 2 years of secret development into the aircraft and had a clear vision of what they wanted to achieve. Tex Johnson, Boeing's senior test pilot, was selected to fly the Dash 80 on its much-anticipated maiden flight, which took place on July 15, 1954. As the crew worked through their checklists, they carried the company's future on their shoulders. In theory, both military and civilian markets held great potential for the aircraft. However, Boeing had been cautious and slow to enter the commercial market, partly due to resistance from both the traveling public and airlines toward jet airliners. Additionally, Boeing was heavily focused on the development and production of bombers. With the Dash 80, Boeing not only committed to the commercial market, but also gained a significant advantage over its competitors. Boeing's board made the decision to build the aircraft on April 22, 1952, convinced that the US Air Force would eventually need jet transports. They believed that a well-designed jet could serve both military and civilian markets. Powered by 4 turbojets, the Dash 80 lifted off after using just 2,100 feet of runway. Johnson, the test pilot, later remarked that the plane wanted to climb like a rocket, and he had to throttle back to stay within the airspeed limits for the maiden flight.
After flying the B-47 and the B-52, there was no doubt in my mind that the aircraft of the future, military and civilian transportation, was going to be jet. Of course, the prototype 707 was all built with company money, and it was a big responsibility. It was a gamble to some degree from a structure standpoint and a performance standpoint, but not nearly as much as the gamble of how long was it going to take the airlines to decide that's what they wanted and come up with the money to produce it.
Tex Johnston, Chief of Flight Test for the Boeing Airplane Company, signed for the new jet transport and climbed aboard with Dick Flesh, his co-pilot.
With half of Seattle out there observing it, and all of the industry, airlines, engine manufacturers, competition looking down your throat, you had a lot on your mind. But once you fire up the engines and taxi out for takeoff, all that leaves you, and you're primarily absorbed in all the systems in the airplane, how it's reacting to the control. And as we taxied out, the people were jumping up and down and waving, and it was a celebration.
We're clear to come up on power.
We gave it the power and took off, and it rotated, and the first lift off, the airspeed just kept building. I kept pulling the nose up, and we were light, relatively light, you know, and we were climbing steep. And my co-pilot, Dick Slesh, said, "Man, is this thing going to climb straight up?" And after I landed, some of the engineers said, "We thought something was wrong with the control system. The airplane was climbing so steep. All I was doing is keeping on the best climb speed."
Flight test period, ready start. We've been climbing for 8,700 feet. All engine operation is normal. Hydraulic pressures are normal. The airplane feels good. The airplane taxied in, and when it had been parked, the pilots and co-pilots were congratulated by William M. Allen, president of the Boeing Airplane Company.
I could see the difference in that man from he shook hands with me before I climbed aboard on the initial flight. And to me, it looked like he was carrying a bit of he was stooped a bit at a load he was carrying, mentally, financially. When we landed at Boeing Field and he came out there, he was standing straight and tall and smiling, and it was beautiful to witness the difference in the man. IATA, the International Air Transport Association, which includes all the airlines of the world, had assembled in Seattle for their annual convention. And Boeing just happened to have a prototype airplane that was going to shrink the world by a factor of 2. But I've sold fighters and commercial airplanes, and you demonstrate them to impress people what they're capable of. And I knew that the prototype, and there's one maneuver that you can do with no hazard whatsoever. I decided that I would do a roll to impress the people. So I came across and did a chandelle. One of my test engineers happened to have his camera with him, and he snapped a picture, which is famous today, with the airplane on its back, the engines up on top of the wing, and the Lake Washington below. I was called to Mr. Allen's office Monday morning, and Mr. Allen asked me what I thought I was doing, and I said I was selling airplanes, and explained it's a 1G maneuver, and it's absolutely non-hazardous, but it's very impressive. And his comment was, "You know that now, we know that, but just don't do it anymore." So it was fine.
The first test, which was smooth and uneventful, lasted only an hour and 24 minutes. In the next 8 days, the aircraft logged a total of 15 hours and 46 minutes of flight time. As the speed and altitude capabilities of jet fighters and bombers increased, They were forced to slow down and descend when refueling from piston engine transports. It didn't take long for the USAF to assess the Dash 80 and recognize its potential as a refueling tanker. Air-to-air refueling had become increasingly crucial, especially with the expansion of the jet fighter fleet during the Korean War, and the existing piston engine tankers were clearly insufficient. The need for an all-jet tanker was apparent, and the Dash 80 arrived at the perfect moment. Just 3 weeks after the Dash 80's first flight, and before it had even been tested as a tanker, Boeing received a contract from the USAF for 29 aircraft. This contract provided a significant morale boost for Boeing, especially since there had been little interest in the civilian variant at the time. The Dash 80 was soon equipped with a modifying flying boom, and a successful refueling test program quickly commenced. On October 5, 1954, the military version of the aircraft was officially designated the KC-135A when the contracts were finalized. Although the initial military order was relatively small, the potential was vast. In late 1953, the USAF had already begun seeking proposals to supply the Strategic Air Command with a jet tanker fleet to extend the operational range of its B-47 and B-52 bombers. 6 companies had been invited to make formal submissions. The USAF tender actually called for the provision of 800 tankers. The stakes for Boeing were immense. While the Dash 80 continued its test flights, production of the KC-135A began at Boeing's Renton factory. Though it was impossible to predict at the time, the KC-135A would remain in production for the next 10 years, with 732 units built in total. The KC-135A models were all equipped with upgraded Pratt & Whitney J57 turbojets and had an impressive fuel capacity, with up to 21 fuel tanks. The aircraft could also transport up to 160 troops or carry 83,000 pounds of cargo. Recognizing the strategic importance of polar regions, Boeing produced a specialized version of the KC-135A for Arctic operations. This version was designed to allow the crew to live aboard for weeks without needing ground support. Featuring a living area, bunks, and food storage facilities. The first production KC-135A Stratotanker was rolled out at Renton on July 18, 1956. The basic design of the KC-135A remained largely unchanged from the Dash 80 prototype, with the same overall dimensions. The first KC-135A tanker took flight on August 31, 1956. After undergoing initial testing, it entered service with the Strategic Air Command by mid-1957. The Stratotanker was notable for its lack of windows and its boom operator's station, with the high-speed refueling boom neatly mounted beneath the rear fuselage. As a military aircraft, the KC-135A was built to meet performance and safety standards that differed significantly from those required for civilian aircraft. Its J57 turbojets, equipped with water injection for additional thrust, produced intense noise and thick sooty smoke during takeoff. With a gross takeoff weight of 316,000 pounds, the KC-135A required a runway length of 13,600 feet, much too long for civilian airports. The KC-135A's airframe was constructed from a different alloy than the commercial variant. Its refueling system, the flying boom, was a Boeing innovation. The boom itself is 27 feet long and extends up to 46 feet, made of concentric tubes. The boom operator, positioned in the tanker, controls the docking process by maneuvering the boom into place. Once contact is made with the receiving aircraft, fuel is pumped from the KC-135's tanks through a series of valves and a pressure regulator, then into the boom and finally into the receiver. Standard speed booms could be swapped out for high-speed versions, designed to refuel faster aircraft like the SR-71 Blackbird. Boeing's contract with the Air Force gave the company the confidence and financial stability to further pursue the profitable civilian market. Pan American became Boeing's first 707 customer when it placed an order for 20 aircraft in October 1955. To Boeing's delight, PanAm also ordered 20 Douglas DC-8s on the same day, even though that plane wouldn't fly for another 3 years. The inaugural 707 airline service was launched on the 26th of October 1958, when PanAm flew 111 passengers from New York to Paris. Soon after, American Airlines launched the first scheduled passenger jet service from Los Angeles to New York. This cut the flight time across the US to about 4 hours, effectively halving it. In the first 18 days of operation, American Airlines transported 3,720 passengers, achieving an impressive load factor of 99.5%. The use of doors at both ends of the cabin allowed for quick boarding and disembarking, a significant advantage that necessitated changes in airport design and operations. The initial 707s were designated as the 707-120. Although the 120 model was primarily designed for domestic routes, PanAm used it for transatlantic flights. The cabin could accommodate 121 first-class passengers or 179 in economy. With the introduction of longer-range 707 models, most of the 120 series aircraft were reassigned to domestic services. The 707's spacious fuselage and excellent performance quickly won favour with both passengers and crew. Its ability to fly above weather conditions, which propeller-driven liners had to navigate through, offered smoother, faster and safer flights. The cabin of the 707 could accommodate twice as many passengers as the older Constellations, making air travel a viable option for a growing number of travellers. Jet travel not only displaced competition from propeller-driven aircraft, but also heralded the decline of passenger ships, which, even into the 1960s, carried more travellers than holidaymakers. It's no exaggeration to say that a transportation revolution had begun. The competition soon intensified, with the emergence of the Douglas DC-8, the Convair 880, and various European models. Boeing was compelled to initiate a program to develop even more advanced jetliners. The initial risk of $15 million had been far surpassed, with new stakes approaching $100 million. Although Boeing maintained a significant production lead with the 707, Douglas gained traction with the DC-8 by promising greater payload capacities, longer range, more powerful engines, and other benefits for airlines and passengers. While PanAm and American Airlines operated the 707-120, Boeing was already working on another important version of the aircraft. In response to the Douglas challenge, Boeing had announced the development of a new 707, offering greater range and capacity, the Intercontinental 707-320. In a hydrostatic test tank, the fuselage of the Intercontinental 707-320 was subjected to conditions equivalent to 40 years or 50,000 flight cycles. During testing, the fuselage was intentionally torn open and then subjected to cycles of extremely high pressures and heavy loads. Despite this, the damaged structure endured the stress without sustaining further structural damage. The 707-320 made its first flight on January 11, 1959. The success of the test series was so significant that just 35 days later, the aircraft was handed over to the Federal Aviation Agency, FAA, for certification trials. At Edwards Air Force Base in California, the Intercontinental underwent rigorous testing. It wasn't allowed to carry passengers until it received a certificate of airworthiness from the FAA. FAA test pilots conducted a thorough evaluation of the aircraft's flying characteristics, while ground engineers measured the performance of every component. The test team pushed the aircraft to its limits, flying it at altitudes ranging from low levels to the stratosphere, and at speeds from near stall up to 700 miles per hour. The Intercontinental 707-320 was over 12 feet longer than the 707-120, and featured a wingspan nearly 12 feet greater. It was the first model to be truly intercontinental, directly challenging the claims made by Douglas for the DC-8. Equipped with powerful Pratt & Whitney JT4 turbojets, the aircraft was capable of carrying a payload equivalent to 189 passengers. One of the final FAA tests involved installing ballast tanks in the cabin, filled with water to simulate the weight of 180 passengers and 45,000 pounds of payload. An additional 9 tons were added for extra measure, bringing the total weight of the aircraft to 316,000 pounds, a significant challenge for the FAA team of pilots, engineers and technicians. On the test day, conditions were ideal for a maximum weight takeoff, and the powerful turbojets required only 2/3 of the runway to lift the Intercontinental into the air. The 707-320 was also offered with the Rolls-Royce Conway Mark 508 turbojet as an engine option. BOAC was among the first to choose this engine, partly because it was a British product. The decision to purchase a 707 instead of a British aircraft had political implications. During the trials for its British certification, several extensive modifications were required, including a taller fin and a power-assisted rudder. These changes were later incorporated as standard features on the production line. The final test flight, conducted under full airline operating conditions, marks the first truly intercontinental flight of the jet age. The Intercontinental 707-320, sporting its new Boeing livery, was destined for Rome, Italy. William Allen, the chairman of Boeing, had good reason to smile. After departing from Boeing Field in Seattle, the 707-320 took a northeast route along the Great Circle Path. It flew over Canada, Greenland, Scotland, and Germany, cruising at Mach 0.78 and reaching a maximum altitude of 39,160 feet. The aircraft landed in Rome just 11 hours and 6 minutes after takeoff, marking the longest flight ever completed by a jet airliner up to that point. The following day, the plane continued its journey to Paris, Frankfurt and Brussels before making a night stop at Heathrow. The FAA granted certification on September 23, 1958, and the transport revolution advanced further. By the end of 1958, Boeing's Renton plant was producing aircraft for airlines in 11 nations. In addition to the standard 707 models, they were preparing for both the intercontinental versions and new high-speed developments. This variant would eventually be distinct enough to earn its own identity as the Boeing 720. Different versions of the aircraft were assembled simultaneously, with airline labels providing clues to their destinations. For instance, South African Airways and Varig of Brazil had orders for the Intercontinental 320, while a version for Lufthansa was equipped with Rolls-Royce Conway engines. This particular version gained popularity and was marketed as the 707-420. As production ramped up, 707 milestones were achieved rapidly. The 100th 707, adorned in the livery of Air India International, was also a 707-420. By the end of 1959, the medium-range 720s were being delivered to United Airlines. In total, 154 of this model were built in 2 different versions. Lufthansa flew back to Germany in record time. Sabena began operating 707 services to Africa and Russia. The 720 model achieved a speed of Mach 0.9, just as the designers had promised. A Rolls-Royce-powered Intercontinental 707 made history for BOAC by completing the first non-stop crossing of the North Pacific, flying from Seattle to Tokyo. Air France introduced the Model 320 on transatlantic routes, while Braniff launched a special tropical version of the aircraft. The new jets were so well received that, until sufficient numbers were in service, they were often filled exclusively with first-class travellers. Within a year of entering service, the 707 had carried over 2 million passengers. Australia's Qantas launched a new service from Sydney to San Francisco, one of many new routes established worldwide with the introduction of Boeing's aircraft. Despite significant pressure to purchase British aircraft, Qantas opted for the 707-120. Boeing had designed this short-bodied version specifically to allow Qantas to operate from Sydney's short runway, as well as the short runways of its Pacific stopover destinations. The longer routes, typically flown by Qantas, meant sacrificing some passenger capacity in favour of enhanced performance. This trade-off was more than compensated by the plane's improved range and speed. Although only 7 of these aircraft were built, they proved to be a great success. Qantas passengers experienced the Pacific Ocean journey reduced to just 15 hours. Production of the 707 series concluded in 1979, with a total of 917 aircraft across all versions built. These jets were operated by 62 different airlines, and in at least 300 of them are still in service today. One of the most definitive signs that the jet age had arrived occurred in December 1959, when a United States Air Force 707, the C-137A, landed in Rome. The jet, carrying President Eisenhower on a mission dubbed Operation Monsoon, was used for a whirlwind tour of 11 countries in 19 days, a journey that would have previously taken over a month. In Turkey, the president was welcomed by more than 400,000 people. In India, Eisenhower fulfilled one of his dreams by visiting the Taj Mahal with President Nehru. And upon arriving in Athens via Tehran, he had traversed the entire empire of Alexander the Great in just 1 day's travel. The president's journey continued through France, Spain, and Morocco before returning to the United States. The trip was a resounding success, with massive crowds welcoming him at each stop. However, its significance extended beyond diplomacy. For millions of people, it marked the beginning of a new era in global travel. Package tours have since become a common way for people to experience the world, echoing Eisenhower's journey. For Boeing, the mission highlighted the critical role of the 707. Although the military had its own version, the C-135, the USAF also acquired civilian 707s, which were designated as C-137s. The 707s replaced the Air Force's small VIP fleet and served as presidential transports for every president from Eisenhower to Reagan.
Thank you very much indeed for coming out on this cold night to welcome my party and me back home. It's certainly good to be here. Now, I must remind you that this morning we had breakfast in Madrid, lunch in Casablanca, and now we are home at an hour which, by our getting up time, was 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning. So you can realize that this is not a time for a very erudite and informing speech.
These planes have become historical icons in their own right. For instance, one aircraft served as Air Force One from 1962 to 1972. Its most sober moment occurred when it was used to return the body of President John F. Kennedy to Washington after his assassination. The designation Air Force One has since been assigned to other aircraft, and it's the radio call sign used only when the president is on board. The VC-137s were operated by the Air Transport Wing. Each was configured with a custom-built interior, luxuriously equipped with only 22 seats. The C-137s were equipped with advanced navigation and communication systems to ensure global self-sufficiency. By 1989, presidential duties were transferred to a pair of Boeing 747s. In contrast to the limited number of C-137s, a substantial fleet of C-135s was produced. Many of these airframes have been extensively reconfigured and used in a wide variety of roles by different branches of the military. During the Vietnam War, the C-135 series was particularly prominent, with up to 10 different variants in operation simultaneously. Several C-135s were modified to carry electronic communications and intelligence equipment under the Strategic Air Command. The EC-135s, which served as airborne command posts, played a crucial role in the air war. These aircraft were originally designed for other purposes, but were adapted to the EC-135 standard.
The EC-135 aircraft looks like just about any other C-135 series aircraft in the Air Force inventory. The big difference is in the back. This is the SAC Airborne Command Post, known as the Looking Glass. The Airborne Command Post is a scaled-down version of SAC's primary underground command post and has the same basic capabilities. On a day-to-day basis, the underground command post controls SAC's forces around the world, but it would be a primary target for a potential enemy during wartime. If the underground command post is disabled, control of SAC's forces passes to the Airborne Command Post. Its battle staff is trained to manage any counterattack the President may direct and to direct the recovery of returning bomber and tanker forces. There's an Airborne Command Post flying over the Midwest 24 hours a day. Additionally, the Looking Glass aircraft has the capability to launch the Minuteman missile force if primary launch control centers are disabled.
The Looking Glass planes, a notable example of the EC-135s, were particularly significant.
Yeah, we're about ready to take off. Communications is the key element in maintaining command and control of the forces. Looking Glass is equipped with radios covering a wide spectrum of frequencies and includes the Air Force satellite communications system. At the touch of a button, the battle staff can talk to any SAC base around the globe.
An EC-135 designated Looking Glass was operated by a crew of 16.
Attention battle staff, Major General Buckman is on board the aircraft.
The EC-135s were equipped to remain airborne indefinitely, featuring both reverse fueling capabilities from SAC bombers via the boom and a standard refueling point. Each EC-135 was staffed by 5 flight crew members, 10 additional personnel, and a very senior officer. Over their service life, the EC-135s have been adapted into 8 different versions, reflecting their crucial roles and the special care given to their maintenance.
Lights out.
There's certainly been a lot of changes in the Looking Glass as far as the equipment and the performance of the aircraft over the past 21 years. With the basic vision to provide a survival command and control element has not changed. I think the great achievement is it's been airborne continuously for 21 years, and that's due to a lot of dedicated people. We have outstanding air crews, battle staff, but mainly the people who supported on the ground have allowed this to happen. The maintenance people. They have to be out here 24 hours a day to ensure that we maintain this record and we meet our commitments.
Although they were first produced in the mid-1960s, many EC-135s remain in service today. Notable milestones in their service include providing tactical command during the 1986 raid on Libya, confirming the Chernobyl accident through intercepts of Russian communications, and playing a key role in the Gulf War. In the late 1960s, the USAF awarded Boeing a contract to convert 2 Series 320 civil airliners for military use. Upon completion, there was no mistaking the EC-137s, as both were equipped with a distinctive 30-foot diameter rotating antenna mounted above the rear fuselage. These aircraft were the first 707-based AWACS planes, Airborne Warning and Control System. The AWACS were designed to function as a combination of a radar station, communication center, and command post. They were mobile, flexible, survivable, and resistant to jamming. With their capability for long-range surveillance in all weather conditions and over all terrain types, AWACS have become a crucial component of Western defense systems. As AWACS, the military 707s have truly demonstrated their capabilities as aerial sentries. A supersonic jet traveling at twice the speed of sound would move only 1/8 of an inch in the time it takes a laser beam to travel 1 mile. At the Air Force Weapons Laboratory in Kirkland, New Mexico, an airborne laser laboratory has been established. This aircraft was converted from an early KC-135 production tanker and is equipped with a distinctive narrow hump on top of the fuselage, which houses a rotating turret at the front. The turret, measuring 5 feet in height and weighing around 4,000 pounds, is a key component of the system. The turret is capable of rotating at about 100 degrees per second. The Airborne Laser Laboratory, operated by the 49th and 50th Test Wings, utilizes carbon dioxide laser technology to test its effectiveness on various materials used in aircraft construction. Engineers and scientists who developed the high-energy laser program are on board, allowing them to operate and refine the equipment they conceived, designed, and built. This airborne laboratory is another example of the diverse roles and configurations the 707 family has undergone over the years. Since the mid-1960s, the USAF has continuously maintained and updated its KC-135 tanker fleet. A significant upgrade for these tankers was the installation of fuel-efficient fan engines, which provided greater thrust and instant start capability. The re-engined KC-135s benefited from a 30% increase in thrust, coupled with a 27% reduction in fuel consumption, 85% less noise, and 90% fewer emissions. These advancements also extended the aircraft's lifespan. Alongside the new engines, the electronic, hydraulic, and flight control systems of these updated tankers were also modernized. Among the various unique variants of the 135 series are reconnaissance aircraft featuring a distinctive thimble-shaped nose. This bulbous nose houses sensitive radar equipment, and many of these planes are also equipped with camera ports and fuselage antennas. These aircraft play a crucial role in ongoing intelligence collection. Even more unusual were the 8 EC-135Ns, which had an even more pronounced nose deformation to accommodate a 7-foot diameter dish antenna. Converted in 1967, these planes were crucial to the Apollo projects. Operating in pairs, they ensured continuous voice communication between astronauts and ground control during manned space flights. In addition, they assisted in tracking the spacecraft. Despite the numerous innovative variants, the KC-135 tanker remains the cornerstone of the 135 series. Since the re-engineering program began in 1980, the operational benefits have been significant. The re-engined KC-135RE alone saves up to $400 million annually for the USAF due to reduced fuel consumption. Enhanced fuel efficiency allows these aircraft to offload more fuel, as they require less for their own needs. In addition to the re-engineering, 33 major modifications have been made to enhance strategic readiness. These upgrades have reduced maintenance needs, enabling crews to deploy more quickly. Around the clock, every day of the year, KC-135 crews are on alert globally. During the 1986 raid on Tripoli, the tankers were crucial. They refueled the F-111s at least 4 times on their way to Libya and twice on the return journey. This capability was vital, as both Spain and France had denied the United States overflight rights. In addition to the tankers, an EC-135E provided tactical command for the raid, and another C-135 was tasked with delivering photographic evidence back to Washington. During Operation Desert Storm, both US and French KC-135s played a crucial role, providing in-flight refueling for all US aircraft as well as several Allied aircraft. The updated KC-135s, equipped with powerful new turbofan engines, benefited from a substantial increase in thrust. This improvement allows these aircraft to take off with a full load from a distance up to 2,500 feet shorter compared to earlier models. The maximum takeoff weight has been increased to 322,500 pounds. The efficiency of the new fan engines translates into significant operational benefits. The aircraft can offload 65% more fuel at a 1,500-mile radius, and an impressive 150% more at a 2,500-mile radius. Currently, the average C-135 airframe has utilized only a third of its expected 30,000-hour lifespan. There seems no doubt that the jet will still be in service beyond the current plans for their retirement around the year 2020. In 1972, the Dash 80 was retired and donated to the National Air and Space Museum. It remained in storage in the Arizona desert for 18 years due to a lack of exhibition space. The Dash 80 had been a pioneer in modern jet transport and a testbed for new aircraft and engines. In 1990, the aircraft was brought out of storage for a final restoration. A dedicated crew undertook the meticulous task of returning the Dash 80 to flying condition, checking and rechecking every rivet and overhauling the old Pratt & Whitney turbojet engines. After the extensive refurbishment, the Dash 80 was prepared for its final flight back to Seattle, the city where its groundbreaking journey began. The Dash 80's final flight to Seattle was a significant event. Piloted by Paul Bennett and co-pilot Jerry White, the aircraft made a stop at Moses Lake, Washington, to pick up a group of distinguished guests and longtime admirers. The restoration of the Dash 80 had been a major effort, involving 15 technicians and engineers working a total of 1,000 man-hours. Among the notable passengers was Tex Johnson, the senior test pilot who'd first flown the Dash 80 over 35 years earlier. The Dash 80's preservation is indeed a fitting tribute to its historical significance. By using dry ice for paint stripping, Boeing not only ensured that the aircraft's restoration was environmentally friendly, but also highlighted the ongoing innovation in aviation technology and practices. Restoring the Dash 80 to its original livery and showcasing it in the Boeing Museum of Flight honors its pivotal role in the evolution of commercial aviation. It serves as a living testament to the advancements and milestones achieved in the industry thanks to the Dash 80's pioneering efforts. The Dash 80's legacy is a powerful reminder of the impact that a single aircraft can have on an entire industry. Its journey from a groundbreaking prototype to a symbol of aviation's golden age illustrates how innovation can set the stage for a monumental change. Boeing's transformation from a minor player to a dominant force in civil aviation is a direct result of the Dash 80's pioneering role. The aircraft's recognition as one of the Smithsonian's most important aircraft highlights its enduring significance in the history of flight. The Boeing 707 indeed transformed the aviation industry, turning air travel into a feasible option for millions of people and shrinking the world in unprecedented ways. Its role in both civil and military aviation is a testament to its design's versatility and impact. Its robust design ensures that it will remain a fixture in the skies, a lasting symbol of the jet age and the innovative spirit of the 1950s.
The United States, of course, has many well-known international symbols, the White House, Statue of Liberty, Mount Rushmore, the flag, but really only the last of those, the flag, is mobile, can actually show the flag, as they say, around the world. Would you think it's fair to say that Air Force One also represents a mobile symbol of the United States? Is that fair?
Yeah, well, I know you've been on Air Force One, and I'll tell you, when you taxi up in our country or in some other country, there's a great emotion about it. And I loved, when I go up to shake hands, at the rope line with some kid, it was that exciting to see this, and you can really tell that they were moved, and the teachers bring the kids to see it. So it has a symbolism that projects. It is a symbol. It is a mobile symbol of the presidency and thus the country.
Even now, many people tend to overlook a plane that has quietly revolutionized the concept of international travel, the Boeing 747. Individuals like the late Juan Trippe, the former president of Pan American Airlines, foresaw its potential right from the beginning.
Juan Trippe came to Seattle to sign the contract. It happened to coincide with the 50th anniversary of the Boeing Company, and he was the guest speaker at a large banquet downtown. And so he gave this speech on the 747. And he was a very idealistic man anyway. He'd started more or less international travel by, spawning PanAm from the days when they were prop airplanes flying and so forth. And he said, I think that the 747 is a great weapon for peace, and it's really competing with the intercontinental missiles for man's destiny, which sort of surprised us all. And he thought it was going to win. And he explained that when you got millions of tourists flying back and forth between countries, and they were exchanging their goods and produce and products and so forth, that you would learn to like each other before and do business with each other before you'd blow them up, I suppose. And turns out that he's pretty close to right, because 20 years later, we're bringing out a new airplane, the 747-400 version, and that year, Reagan and Gorbachev have decided to scrap missiles. And so, and we're doing that's a trillion revenue passenger miles will be flown in 1989. So Juan Trippe was really a prophet.
On August 16, 1989, in Sydney, Australia, a new Boeing 747-400, the latest iteration of the 747 series, landed at Sydney International Airport. Covering 18,001 kilometers from London in an impressive 20-hour, 9 minute, and 5 seconds, it marked the longest non-stop airline flight in history. This achievement became a significant milestone in the world of travel during the 747's 21st year. However, the remarkable story of the 747 begins far from Sydney, Australia, both in space and time. On July 16, 1916, in Seattle, Washington, William Edward Boeing established the Pacific Aero Products Company. As the USA entered the war against Germany in mid-1917, Bill Boeing secured an order for 50 of his Model C trainers. By the end of the year, Pacific Aero Products transformed into the Boeing Airplane Company. In March 1919, Bill Boeing and his pilot Eddie Hubbard pioneered the first international mail flight covering the route from Seattle to Vancouver. By 1928, the Boeing 80A represented the pinnacle of travel comfort, introducing the first flight nurse or air hostesses. Improvements in the metal fabrication techniques ushered in a series of metal-skinned, low-wing monoplanes, exemplified by the XP-9 bombers. By 1934, when Roscoe Turner completed a journey from London to Melbourne, Australia, aboard a Boeing 247, a genuine revolution in passenger air transport had unfolded. In 1933, the 247 significantly reduced the U.S. transcontinental flight time from 27 to 19.5 hours. Fitted with twin Pratt & Whitney Wasp engines, it outpaced other airliners of the period by 50 to 70 miles an hour. Despite its groundbreaking design, the success of the 247 was short-lived. When TWA sought a competitor, the birth of the DC series at Douglas rendered the 247 nearly obsolete, especially with the introduction of the DC-2 and DC-3. Undeterred, Boeing shifted its focus to size, unveiling the four-engine XB-15. It was the first really big plane to use state-of-the-art technology in streamlining and high-performance power plants. Only one XB-15 was built, but Boeing had established itself as a manufacturer of big aircraft. When Juan Trippe of Pan American Airlines approached Boeing with the idea of constructing a large flying boat for intercontinental passenger routes, the XB-15's engines and wing design were repurposed to fit the new hull, giving rise to the Model 314 Boeing Clipper. The Clipper boasted impressive dimensions, with a gross weight of 82,500 pounds and a payload capacity exceeding 15 tons, encompassing fuel, passengers, and cargo. Priced at $700,000 each, the construction of each Clipper demanded 350,000 man-hours, representing a significant stride toward Juan Trippe's vision of an affordable international travel system. The Clipper facilitated regular scheduled transatlantic services with its extensive range and the ability to accommodate 2 shifts of flight crew. Concurrently, Boeing pursued a different trajectory, aiming upward. Building on the concept of 4 engines and a more compact fuselage than the XB-15 for enhanced performance, Boeing had crafted Project 299, the prototype of the Flying Fortress B-17. This innovation culminated the 4-engine Stratoliner, characterized by a cigar-shaped pressurized fuselage. Equipped with a supercharger to supply oxygen for high-altitude engine performance, the Stratoliner also delivered pressurized air to the cabin. It wasn't the first 4-engine airliner, but it was the first pressurized airliner to enter service. One Trippe from Pan American ordered 4 Stratoliners and TWA ordered 5. The inaugural flight of the first Stratoliner took place on December 31, 1938, generating considerable excitement due to its capacity to reach 26,000 feet and accommodate 33 passengers. However, despite its promising prospects, setbacks emerged. A significant crash involving Stratoliner No. 1 prompted the addition of a dorsal fin to enhance stability. The outbreak of World War II interrupted the trajectory of international travel development. Nonetheless, advancements in supercharger pressurization and later turbo superchargers contributed significantly to Boeing's line of large bombers. The production of 12,000 B-17s played a pivotal role in the Allied war effort, not only in bomb deployment but also in air combat, surpassing the combined enemy plane victories of all other American warplanes. The subsequent introduction of the B-29 Superfortress, featuring a pressurized fuselage, marked the pinnacle of World War II bombers. Its historic impact culminated with the deployment of the bomb that brought an end to the war. Post-war, its transport variant, the C-97, evolved into the Stratocruiser, representing Boeing's ultimate achievement in large piston-engine international airliners. In 1945, Boeing's new president, William Allen, recognized the imperative for the company to re-enter the civil aircraft production. He took a bold gamble by announcing the construction of 50 Stratocruisers at $1 million each. The Stratocruiser epitomized luxury and international travel during an era predating the introduction of economy and tourist fares. Its standout features included a spiral staircase leading to the lower deck lounge, providing passengers with the opportunity to stretch their legs and enjoy a change of scenery. Additionally, the ladies' lounge offered a convenient facility for maintaining in-flight appearances. The Stratocruiser's major competitors at the time were from Lockheed and Douglas. They were like this constellation, essentially pre-war designs. There were also other planes like the British Hermes, flying the international routes. Post-war international air travel did not experience the anticipated boom, leaving the luxury of crossing continents at any time of the day or night accessible only to a privileged minority. In May 1952, the British de Havilland Comet initiated a service from London to Johannesburg, but its introduction to the transatlantic run faced challenges. The trajectory of jet international travel received a boost with the necessity for a new in-flight tanker. The Boeing KC-97, suitable for refueling piston-driven planes, proved too slow for the emerging generation of long-range jet bombers. The B-47, with 6 General Electric J-35 turbojets, took flight in 1947, setting the stage for the next generation, the B-52 Stratofortress, designed to meet the demands of a global defensive weapon with extensive flying ranges. An efficient in-flight refueling system became crucial, leading to Boeing's bold move. The Dash 80 was a novel design with a low-wing and swept-wing monoplane, equipped with 4 Pratt & Whitney J3 engines, initially served as the KC-135 tanker. However, it diverged from its military destiny, evolving into the Boeing 707, the United States' inaugural international jet airliner. The introduction of DC-8s from Douglas on transatlantic routes alongside the 707 marked a turning point. Passengers' numbers surged by 12% annually, prompting Douglas to unveil a stretch version of the DC-8 to meet growing demand. While the 707 faced limitations in stretchability, fate intervened with the U.S. Air Force's competition for a large transport airplane, the C-5A. Boeing, renowned for constructing larger aircraft, enthusiastically entered the contest, dedicating a design team of 500 men to the project in June 1964. The company, drawing on its vast experience in building large planes, was considered to have an advantage over competitors like Lockheed and Douglas. But a year later, in September 1965, the word came out. Boeing, with all its knowledge of big plane construction, had quoted too high of a price, and Lockheed had won the contract to build what became the C-5A Galaxy. However, what initially dealt a blow to Boeing turned out to be a pivotal factor in the future of international jet travel.
When you're competing on something as large as the C-5A, if we had won that contract, it would have absorbed a great deal of our energy, and we probably would not have gone forward with the 747 at that time, and then later. However, the fact that we lost it, and that released a fair amount of energy and resources to do something else, we were anxious to get moving, and it, in a sense, probably accelerated our going into the 747, which it turned out to be a very attractive decision.
The conception of the 747 emerged from extensive consultations with airlines worldwide, and Boeing President William Allen played a crucial role in endorsing the construction despite the absence of firm orders for the plane. Pan American Airlines, with a significant history tied to Boeing's aviation milestones, including the Clipper, Stratoliner, and Stratocruiser, once again played a pivotal role in shaping Boeing's destiny.
Well, Juan Trippe got intrigued in it, and Bill Allen and the two himself, they said, well, what about it? And our designers said, we can design and build it. And he said, if you can build it, I'll buy it. And between the two of them, they struck sort of a deal that they sort of sealed with a handshake. If we would go ahead, I believe the timing this was in February of '66. If we'd agree to build the airplane, that he would buy it, we said, well, we'd have to have orders from at least 3 airlines for 50 aircraft. And if that was the case, we'd go ahead in August 1st of 1966. At that time, we did not have signed contracts, I believe, for the 50, but we were close enough and we were already enraptured with the concept, so we went ahead. I believe that Juan Trippe, in order to ensure that we were serious about it, more or less bet Bill Allen $10 million that he wouldn't go ahead. It wasn't so much a bet. I think it was a if you didn't do it, you'd have to pay the money. But we did go ahead, so we didn't have to pay the $10 million.
On July 25, 1966, the Boeing Company decided to convert this forest into one of the biggest manufacturing complexes in the world. The company decided to erect here the largest factory, volume-wise, ever built, in order to assemble the largest commercial jet airplane in aviation history. The plane was the giant 747, 6 stories high, 231 feet long, with a wingspan wider than a football field. 2 1/3 times larger than a 4-jet 707. At the time, for the first plane, only 31 months go ahead to roll out. But for the factory, time compressed even more. 9 months until fabrication of the first part for the first plane had to begin. Challenges of the factory came first. Challenges posed by the necessity of building that first part on time, of keeping one step ahead of the growing plane.
Clearing timbered hilltops was necessary to make room for the factory, and a massive landscaping effort transformed 630 acres in Everett, approximately 40 miles north of Seattle. Over 250 contractors, subcontractors, and material contractors were involved in the project, with a contractor labor force of 2,800 men representing nearly every construction craft in the area.
Well, as far as a financial risk or a business risk, it was, you'd have to say it was awesome, I guess, because obviously what the money it took to develop, design, and build the prototype airplanes and then build a production rate up was far in excess of the net worth of the entire company. So we were betting the company on the success of the airplane.
The railroad, second steepest in the nation, lifts trains as high as Seattle Space Needle, more than 500 feet, from Puget Sound to factory level in less than 3 miles. Speedy construction of the $2 million railroad was essential. The line would be required initially for hauling material to the construction site, and later for moving parts and equipment to factory assembly lines.
We threw many men and much equipment into that gulch in order to build that railroad. It was tough to get the ballast down and to get the tracks laid. It was not that we could never do it, but we were able to bring it out on schedule.
The head of facilities for me, a fellow named Bain Lamb, that was building this world's largest building, he used to be a quarterback on the University of Washington Huskies, and I had been a guard at Georgia Tech, and he never liked taking orders from a guard anyway, but he came to me one day and he said, you know, we're not going to get that on time. And I said, the devil, we're not, what do you need? He said, well, I need more people. And I said, you've got them. And then he said, I need more equipment, our earth moving equipment. I said, you've got it. And he said, I need more money. He said, don't bother about it. We'll we'll get it for you. And he said, I need 2 weeks of clear weather. And I said, you've got it, And then, because it turned out God got even because it rained 67 days in a row.
There were always problems. No sooner had clearing begun than rains swept the site. Equipment wired down.
When we found that this glacier till that is so hard also turned out grease. We couldn't work, obviously, in the mud, so we paved about 100 acres under the buildings. Then we were able to work out of the dirt and out of the mud.
Size and speed of the project demanded rigid controls at every turn. As Director of Facilities, Bain Lamb explains,
every single thing that goes on in the project is scheduled and planned in this room. We can tell at an instant whether or not we are ahead or behind schedule.
Overcoming the challenge of job overlap between construction workers and aircraft builders was one of the major hurdles for the planners.
The contractors we knew were going to be in the area adjacent to our people, overhead in the structures, in the towers, underfloor in the trenches and the ducts. At the same time, Boeing people would be trying to produce the parts that would later go into the airplane.
Simultaneously, Joe Sutter, the chief project engineer for the 747, and his team spent over a year finalizing the plane's design to ensure that a mock-up construction could commence promptly once the building was ready, or if necessary, even before that. As soon as it became feasible, construction crews transitioned inside. While interior walls were being installed, activity continued outside on the roof. Electricians worked indoors, stringing cables, while steel workers outside completed the walls of the mock-up building. The building was scheduled to be occupied in midwinter, specifically in January 1967.
We realized early that we were not going to be able to turn over a completed facility. It would be not heated, would be wide open on one end. The floors would still be curing out. A shell is about all we had to deliver. They were wearing gloves and their mackinaws, their hard hats.
They were very, very motivated. The workforce, there was no need to try to energize them. They were upon a very romantic task. They're building the world's largest airplane. And they would, we had people that would drive all the way from Tacoma, which is 70 miles away, to get to Everett to work on the aircraft. They had an enthusiasm that welled up, and finally someone coined the word that they were the Incredibles. And trying to think of who decided, but they got Paul Bunyan insignia and put it on their hard hats. They had to work on hard hats because the building was still under construction, and on their lunch pails, and they had them on their jackets and what have you. And they really did a yeoman's job, yeah.
It was incredible. And the Incredibles is what they were called.
The railway from Puget Sound to Everett ran up its steep incline right into the factory in order to bring the literally millions of parts of the plane together in the right place at the right time. The factory was virtually a city in of itself. It was the world's largest building in cubic capacity, covering 43 acres under one continuous roof. The facility housed thousands of workers and boasted its own food and medical facilities. Resembling a stage as vast as the 40 football fields, eagerly awaiting the arrival of its principal player, the player whose lines had been meticulously polished and refined over many months by a dedicated team, aimed to ensure that everything would be flawless when the curtain rose on opening night.
The whole job started way back down the line when engineers were still looking at paper airplanes and models, and wind tunnel testing began.
Our people devote literally thousands of hours of their time, and both on paper and in the wind tunnel, to minimize drag, because drag is money. Drag costs weight, drag costs fuel.
During the early development stages, Joe Sutter and his team explored nearly 50 different potential shapes, including a double-decker mid-wing configuration. Wind tunnel testing, costing millions of dollars, rigorously measured and recorded every aerodynamic parameter. To power the 747, Boeing sought an entirely new engine, securing one from Pratt & Whitney, who had been working on a similar but smaller concept for the C-5A competition. The high bypass ratio engine, an evolution of the fan jet known as the JT9D model, delivered 43,500 pounds of thrust, equivalent to 87,000 horsepower. Pratt & Whitney tested the engine using a leased B-52 from the Air Force, modifying it to replace two of the B-52's standard engines with the JT9D. In the flight test program, the B-52 reached altitudes exceeding 45,000 feet, and under extreme conditions, the engine received a clean bill of health. The Praying Mantis, a device designed to simulate the experience of taxiing the 747 from a cockpit positioned 29 feet above the ground, played a crucial role in preliminary testing. Jack Waddell, the 747's chief test pilot, actively participated in this testing, demonstrating remarkable precision by parking it next to a cargo dock with a tolerance of plus or minus 6 inches with practice. It proved to many 747 customers that a huge plane would not be an uncontrollable horror around airports. The prospect of emergency evacuation from an unusual height was also faced in the early 747's development, and pilots were given an opportunity to fly in a simulator that used a remotely controlled TV camera scanning an accurate terrain model. In the simulator, the pilot wielded control over speed, altitude, and attitude, aiming to closely mimic the behavior of the actual plane as predicted by the designers. The full-scale mock-up of the 747 served as an engineering tool, systematically testing every part and system destined for the completed aircraft. This meticulous process was essential to ensure the seamless fit of all 4.5 million pieces in the intricate jigsaw puzzle, sourced from numerous subcontractors spanning various locations inside and outside the U.S. The successful assembly of such a colossal jigsaw puzzle presented substantial planning and logistical challenges for the management team. They had to meticulously orchestrate the accurate placement of components in the 43-acre floor of the Everett factory in Washington State.
As you know, there's literally millions of pieces in the airplane and parts, and they were coming from almost all of the 50 states and 17 foreign countries, and so that you had a tremendous logistics problem to get all of these designs and parts and schedules to mesh to bring together a line that was finally going to end up to being building a 747 every 3 days, roughly. They're on a 7-a-month schedule. And we work, as you know, 22 days a month. So it was a tremendous, problem and complexity. And computers weren't really available in the same dimension they are now. And so we were doing a lot of this with older techniques. And so it was an awesome job to keep track of the parts and make sure everything got designed right and tested and put into the airplane.
Given the project scale and innovation, new materials and engineering techniques had to be designed and developed. A large machine shop was established in Auburn, south of Seattle, to craft precision tools and massive jigs that couldn't be produced elsewhere. Without such innovations, economically viable manufacturing of the 747 would have been unattainable. Now, the pivotal moment arrived. The assembly of the 747 No. 1 commenced. The nose section arrived from the Boeing plant in Wichita, and the significant pieces of the jigsaw puzzle started to converge. The systems, initially designed in theory months prior, were now undergoing practical tests, and the trials were exceptionally rigorous. During this phase, the tolerances demanded of the engineering process were the most precise ever required in the aircraft industry at the time. The level of tension on the factory floor mounts. These people have committed themselves fully to the project, and now the 747 No. 1 is beginning to emerge as a whole plane from the sum of its millions of parts. The tail, the height of a 6-story building, many times higher than the altitude reached by the Wright brothers on their first flight, is lowered into place. From the tip of the tail to the tip of the nose, it is also longer than the distance flown by the Wright brothers at Kitty Hawk in 1903. Even with the fuselage and wings assembled, the building process is far from complete. A Boeing 747 comprises 135 miles of wire, much of which was to be meticulously fitted by hand. The full project required the use of 75,000 engineering drawings, and strict adherence to assembly instructions was imperative. The 747's hydraulic system is intricately designed, incorporating safety backup systems to compensate for any potential failure. Coordinating the assembly within the allotted time was an immense undertaking.
I can remember it being a all-encompassing job. We spent 365 days a year working on it, and 7 days a week. I think we would have averaged something like 12, 14, 16 hours a day. I mean, the management. Some people said, I don't understand how Boeing can put an airplane out in 4 years. Well, another way is we did it in 8, but we crammed it into 4. It was a compelling job, and everybody that worked on it was sort of swept up into the enthusiasm for doing it.
26 months ago, as we stood amidst the forest up here at Everett, and the decision was made to go forward with the 747 program, the magnitude of the task that we were faced with really looked formidable.
On Monday, September 13th, 1968, Bill Allen witnessed his vision realized.
We have an airplane now, a remarkable one. Let us move forward to see it in service on the airlines.
And now, let's see the airplane.
Those present on the day recall that, initially, the plane didn't appear very large until it drew closer.
26 stewardesses, representing the 26 airlines that have ordered 158 747s, take part in the christening ceremony.
If you haven't got a pilot, raise your hand.
Organizing the christening may have been Malcolm Stamper's most challenging management task.
All right, now we're going to christen her, as you know, on the count of 3. Don't do it yet, but on 1, you're going to pick the bottle up. 2, over our shoulders. 3, all the way down. Okay? Now the cadence, so don't break it yet. The cadence is going to be 1, 2, 3. Got it? Okay, wait! All right. We're doing it again. 1, 2, 3. Magnificent. Well done.
The 747, in order to get it ready for the traveling public, we really torture the planes. We build 2 airplanes that we destroy in the process. One of them we call a fatigue test airplane, and we actually put it in a harness and fly it for the equivalent of 30 years, let's say, 60,000 hours. And we make it take off and land, and so forth and so on, over and over again. And anything that fails or breaks over time, we fix and then put it into the production line improvements. We also take the airplane and break another airplane and break it up in pieces. We want to know what it takes to break a wing. If you take the wing of a 747, you can deflect it 29 feet at the tip before it breaks. And that's quite a scene to watch it when it finally lets go. I mean, it sounds like an explosion. We break the tail off. We go through a complete destruction of the airplane, finding its real strength. We have all sorts of difficult tests. We'll take the 747 and purposely drag its tail on the runway to make sure that it will take off in that mode if the pilot over-rotated the airplane.
The VMU tests determine the maximum performance of the aircraft at the takeoff configuration. They're performed by placing the tail section of the aircraft in contact with the runway until the airplane lifts off. Speed at which it lifts off is called the minimum unstick speed, or VMU. So the VMU then determines basically the takeoff performance of the aircraft. It also determines the ability of the airplane to tolerate inadvertent abuse. In the case of the 747, it's impossible to abuse the airplane enough so that it doesn't lift off cleanly with very good flying qualities.
We actually do a rejected takeoff test where we lock the brakes and freeze out the anti-skid devices. What happens is the brakes are locked, so the tires actually burn off, and it actually burns the wheels off, and it sits finally, and it catches fire. And you have to sit in the plane for 5 minutes without touching it. The fire trucks are there to see if passengers are there. They have time to get off, and then you're allowed to put out the fire. We paid the pilots a little extra for this.
During these high-speed flutter tests, the airplane was shown to be highly stable, and we reached back number speeds of 0.99, which is 99% of the speed of sound, and as high as 685 miles per hour, true airspeed.
The 747 has a landing gear that is forgiving, and whereas that rate of sink in another airplane might have felt like a moderately hard landing, the 747 it will feel soft. I think it's a very forgiving airplane on landings. All our airplanes, we have a system on connected to the brakes that makes it possible for the pilot to apply brake pedal and not worry about skidding the wheels and then blowing some tires. This protective system is on all our airplanes, and on all our airplanes we demonstrate the operation of the airplane during landings and during refused takeoffs, with the system working and with it in various failure conditions. One failure condition is with 2 wheels not connected to the anti-skid system, and then we also check it with all wheels not protected with the anti-skid system and try to show performance of the airplane under these conditions. I thoroughly enjoy flying the airplane. I get a big charge out of it and enjoy it. It has no bad characteristics. It's an honest airplane, and I'm not just saying that from a sales standpoint. I think it's really a good airplane from a piloting and also from a passenger standpoint.
When you get in the airplane, it does seem very high up. Your eye level approximately 27 feet high above the ground. However, you've got very good visibility looking down, so you can see very close to the nose of the airplane. As far as taxiing, it's much easier than, say, a 707 to taxi. After taxiing around for a little bit, or even the landings or the takeoffs, it seems very normal, and the other airplanes seem like they sit too close to the ground.
On December 30th, 1969, following the flight testing period, Federal Aviation Authority officials arrived to pass judgment on the safety of the aircraft. For Boeing executives, a revolution in world transport awaited just a signature away.
You know, the airplane doesn't take very long to make sure. So it's a big screw, really. I did sign the airplane flight manual there. I'm going to sign now the production certificate, the production limitation record. It's going to make certification for the 747.
The outcome of this effort is that we find the Boeing 747 as meeting or exceeding the safety standards developed and experienced of the Federal Aviation Administration. As a result of this effort, which included some 1,500 hours of test flying, we are convinced this airplane meets or exceeds the standard for safety evolved in civil aviation history. We therefore recommend the Boeing 747 received the FAA Type Certificate.
The mostest of everything describes the new giant of commercial aviation, the jetliner 747. Contrasted with great conventional aircraft, the 747 will carry 490 passengers. This is more than double current capacity. Its engines will be twice as powerful as today's airliner. An idea of the size of the engines is emphasized by two stewardesses perched on the rim of a jet. Stepping inside the cabin is like entering a small theater. Pilots, stewardesses, and a passenger or two provide realistic perspective relative to passageways and rows of seats as they conduct an inspection of this mock interior. The first of these great birds, 25 in all at a total cost of $525 million, will be delivered by the Boeing Company to Pan American Airways in 1969.
With the 747 now in service, the factory shifted into full production. However, development continued, and within a year, the first new model, the 200B, took to the air. The only apparent external change was the number of windows on the top deck, retaining the basic 747 look and its user-friendly approach to spanning the world's skies. Even before the production lines began to roll, another critical aspect of construction had to be addressed: interior design. The demands of various client airlines for interior design could vary widely. This Air India version from the mid-70s represents one of the more exotic approaches to interior decoration. Before any 747 can be painted, it has to be wheeled over the freeway next to the Everett factory to the paint shop. It's a challenging sight for any passing driver unfamiliar with the area. Masking the fuselage surface is a highly intricate task. For any white-topped version of the plane, more than 70 gallons of paint may be required, and the levels of decoration can vary significantly. In first class, decor can range from simply functional to highly romantic.
I think at last count we may have been building 9 or 10 different models of the 747 because you need them for different things. For instance, the Japanese, who had a regional linked stage route for the planes, flying between their various provinces, wanted a plane that took off and landed quite frequently. So we went in and changed the landing gear and the flap system to accommodate that. We called it a short range 747, 747 SR. People wanted to fly freight and passengers, and so we made a part of it. We put cargo doors on the side and allowed them to, put large containers into the aircraft. We had people that wanted to fly nothing but freight, so we built freighters where we open the nose of the airplane up, and you can load these 8 by 8 foot containers that would be the size of a huge truck trailer into the aircraft and fly it, and that has become a large business. We had a plane, the PanAm wanted to fly longer distance, farther and faster, so we wanted one that would climb higher and have higher speeds, and so we built an SP, Special Performance it was called, and we took a section of it out, so it was a shorter airplane.
So, what's the significance of the number 747 and 747 SR, 747 Combi, and 747 SP?
Well, Boeing has always had 7s in their aircraft numbering. B-17, even the B-52. If you add 5 and 2 together, you get 7, I guess. So that may be a little bit of mystique. And we had built a 707. Which, by the way, had 4 engines, and then built a 727, which had 3 engines, and a 737 that had 2 engines. So you can't make any sense out of this, except 747 was next in line for the number, and so we used it for 747 has 4 engines.
In 1983, the 747-300 entered into service, introducing an elongated upper deck that allowed airlines to add up to 44 economy seats on that level. The 747 had evolved into the most recognized airplane globally, sparking a complete revolution in international travel.
747, and we talk of it in cents per seat mile, but it's inexpensive enough now to make it open for everyone. Everyone can fly today.
This revolution extended to airport infrastructure, with terminal design requirements expanding to accommodate the growing number of people on the ground. Traditional stairways gave way to air bridges, and baggage carousels became ubiquitous. The plane has had an immense influence on the way people perceive world travel. Since 1968, it has pulled the continents closer together and dramatically increased the number of people who look at world travel as an everyday and readily affordable fact of life. For about 50 years, the Boeing 747 has carried 4 billion passengers in several space shuttles. During the development of the 747, concerns were raised about its potential to overload airport passengers and baggage facilities and overstress runways and taxiways. While addressing passenger-related challenges took some time, the 747 has proven not to be hard on airport surfaces. It places no more stress on the runways than a 707, and despite accidents in the air, the overall safety record of the plane is excellent.
What started out as our greatest risk turned out to be our greatest reward. The 747 has been a marvelous product for Boeing and for the flying public. It's exceeded our fondest expectations. It's been very effective for us, profitable for us. It's allowed us to have the resources, if you will, to gain the resources to build new airplanes, the 767, the 757, very advanced designs. It's allowed us to put those kinds of improvements back into the 747, and as you'll notice, it has winglets on it now. And of course, if you could get inside the electronics, you'd find it was all digitized and very modern aircraft. So it's what looked like a really big gamble turned out to be a really big gain.
The 747-400, an improved version of its predecessors, boasts several enhancements. Rolls-Royce, Pratt & Whitney, and General Electric provide more powerful engines. With an 8,000-mile range, the 747-400 enables non-stop flights on legs such as LA-Hong Kong, London-Tokyo, and Singapore-London. Tilted winglets improve fuel burn by approximately 3%, contributing to the improved range. Digital technology has played a crucial role in simplifying controls. Now, a flight crew of 2 can handle the plane with no extra strain, showcasing advancements in efficiency and ease of operation for the 747-400. New generation materials have allowed weight reduction while at the same time increasing strength.
We originally started out, we estimated there might be 600 747s, built in time.
Indeed, the 747 has become a familiar and enduring sight in the skies. Its longevity is a testament to its durability as an aircraft.
The 747 was a great challenge for me, obviously, and as I look back on a career full of interesting and wonderful challenges, it's the number one task I've ever had to do, and it was a thrill to be a part of it. Bill Allen, I pleased with the confidence he had in putting me in charge of it. I worked with a fabulous group of people in designing and building it. It's been a wonderful experience.
The visionary deal struck between Bill Allen and One Trip in 1965 has undoubtedly paid off in a significant and lasting manner, solidifying the 747's place in aviation history.
I think if Bill Allen and One Trip, and I assume they're looking down from heaven at us now, are saying, well, I told you so. I mean, they both were guessing this. In other words, what we thought was a great risk for those fellows, they were just smarter than we were. They knew it was going to work.
The story of our nation's air defense has of necessity been a story of rapid changes. Changes in concepts, strategies, and weapon systems brought about by the ever-increasing demands of the time. And though the skies of the future may belong to the age of rockets and missiles, the silhouette of a long-range missile bomber still dominates. The following is a profile of the B-52 and an account of the events of the past year which developed the most powerful bomber ever to patrol the air, the B-52H. 4 events of 1960 best illustrate the stages of development and progress of the latest version of the missile bomber. During the latter part of March, the first developmental engineering inspection was held at Boeing's Wichita division to evaluate the innovations to the B-52 which brought about a model change. The new turbofan engines were such a significant change that the engine pod was the subject of a separate DEI a few months earlier. Major interest centered around the airplane mock-up, which displayed such items as the ASG-21 fire control system, the new ECM systems, including a modified shaft dispenser, the numerous changes associated with improved low-level capability, such as the single-motion seat ejection and the bomb navigation system, which incorporates terrain avoidance radar. Air Force acceptance of the planned configuration for the H model during the CEI paved the way for its continued development without delay. The second major phase of development occurred with the delivery of the first 47 body section in August. The H began to take form. With experience accumulated over years of building stratofortresses, the complexity of this airplane presented few problems. Joining of the wings and major sections was accomplished on schedule. The last assembly stage before moving to the camouflage hangar was the change installation where all current ECPs were installed. The rollout of the first H marked the completion of the assembly stage as it was readied for a key pre-delivery inspection. The fourth and last developmental phase was represented by two significant inspections. The contractor's demonstration inspection, held the latter part of November, followed by the contractor's technical compliance inspection. The ground support equipment required for maintenance and overhauling the new systems was demonstrated at the CDI. The majority of the items displayed and demonstrated were applicable to the new model, but some of the items procured for support of earlier models were also included. Immediately following the CDI was the CTCI, which brought more than 170 Air Force personnel to the Wichita Division for a key pre-delivery inspection of the first H model. This was the first opportunity for the Air Force to conduct a thorough scrutiny of all changes included in the first B-52H airplane. Because of the thoroughness of previous DEIs and close coordination during the design of the changes, no major changes were requested. In addition, only a small number of minor changes were necessary to meet Air Force requirements. Behind the relatively short span of a few days of thorough inspection lay many months of experimentation, exploration, and research. The major components which provided a significantly improved airplane over all previous models of the B-52 represent the latest advancement that technology has developed. A major contribution to the superior performance of the new model is the Pratt & Whitney turbofan engines that enable the missile bomber to fly farther than ever before without refueling because of lower specific fuel consumption. The added thrust of the turbofan engine allows system simplification by elimination of the water injection system. Valuable information concerning performance and all pertinent data on the operation of the engine system was collected on a ground test stand and evaluated before the prototype airplane was flown. The G-test bed airplane with the turbofan engines has flown over 100 hours during 1960, with tests being conducted at altitudes up to 60,000 feet. The flight testing explored critical flight conditions, obtained extensive performance data, checked out engine systems, and provided confidence in the B-52H production design. Performance runs with the turbofan engines have shown average specific range improvements over the B-52G of 19.2% for high-altitude cruise conditions. As a missile platform bomber, the latest model of the B-52 has the capabilities of launching 3 different types of missiles, each designed for a separate purpose. All B-52H airplanes are scheduled to be delivered with complete provisions for carrying and launching 4 GAM-72A Quail decoy missiles. The range of the missile is 340 nautical miles at high altitude. Its mission to confuse, dilute, saturate, or otherwise degrade the enemy's radar and IR-controlled air defense systems. This both improves the destructive potential and reduces the cost of strategic bombing missions. Minor modifications to all B-52s previous to the H model were necessary for carrying the Quail. The internal changes were easily made without cost to the plane's performance or its ability to carry other strategic stores. The developmental program of the GAM-77 Hound Dog missile will be completed by mid-1961. The air-to-surface missile has a maximum range of 634 nautical miles and can deliver a nuclear warhead by penetrating at high or low altitude. An advanced version of the Hound Dog, the GAM-77A, is being developed by North American. This missile will have an increased range capability of up to 700 nautical miles and will be equipped with a cartridge starter, making it compatible with the quick alert concept of the B-52H. The third member of the B-52's missile arsenal is the GAM-87A Skybolt ballistic missile, currently under development by Douglas Aircraft Company. The Skybolt Provisions DEI was held at Wichita in June, when the mating of the missile to the B-52G wing was accomplished. The missile DEI was held at Culver City, California in August. The final Provisions DEI to be held at Wichita in January of 1961. GAM-87A provisions will be installed prior to the time the missile and its associated equipment become available. The maximum range capability of the ballistic missile is 1,050 nautical miles, and it can deliver a nuclear warhead on enemy targets from either high or low altitudes. When the Douglas missile reaches operational status, the Stratofortress Skybolt combination will unite the human judgment of a manned bomber with the hypersonic speed of a ballistic weapon, representing the ultimate in weapon system capability. The AN-ASG-21 fire control system is one of the major changes to the airplane configuration, which markedly improves the B-52's defense capability. The major obvious differences between the old and new systems are the tail configuration, dual search track radar, and the new 20mm Gatling gun. Well in advance of actual firing, the entire ASG-21 system underwent a thorough laboratory checkout with the aid of a complete mock-up. The dual search track radar, shown under testing conditions, operates in the KU frequency band, which minimizes interference from lower frequency X-band ECM. Static firing of the Gatling gun was accomplished near the end of the year. Close-up high-speed photography reveals the Gatling gun principle, which discharges at the rate of 4,000 rounds per minute. To date, all ground firing activities have successfully been completed. The Fire Control System Flight Test Program is currently being conducted on a prototype airplane. Approximately 60 hours of flight time with numerous fighter passes have been completed, and the results indicate that the system target detection and acquisition will meet specification requirements. Since early B-47 production, ever-increasing requirements for electrical power have presented a design and supply problem for both the Air Force and Boeing. B-52H design studies pointed up the desirability of providing electrical power supplies which would accommodate revised and improved electronic systems and components. In addition, electrical power supply and drive design changes were necessitated by cowling redevelopment of fan engines on the B-52H. The B-52H is equipped with a 120 kVA electrical power system. Power is furnished by 4 120 kVA brushless generators. The constant speed drive, which will be delivered on early B-52H airplanes, will be rated at 60 kVA. Pending completion of qualification tests. Development and testing of the constant speed drive is continuing. When completed, internal changes will be made in the drive, upgrading it to 120 kVA capability. Throughout the year, several structural programs have been conducted designed to assure the structural integrity and extend the life of the B-52. One such program, the B-52G cyclic test, not yet completed, is helping to determine the fatigue-sensitive areas of the airplane structure. This is particularly significant in view of new strategic operational concepts for the B-52, such as low-level penetration. The test also provides information for establishing structural inspections and required modifications to extend the structural life of the airplane. During the past 12 months, the airplane was cyclic tested to a repeated load spectrum representative of over 200 simulated SAC missions. The test revealed some critical areas which have resulted in changes both for B-52H production and modification kits for existing B-52G models. Timely kit installation will improve the structural life of the critical areas as well as prevent premature structural failures on the SAC fleet. Results of the cyclic test have proved invaluable, both from the standpoint of locating critical fatigue areas and for calculating structural airplane life under varied planned usage. Major design changes in the airplane meant extensive flight testing for structural integrity, flight load surveys, and flutter. Among major structural integrity flight tests were those which measured airplane capabilities with and without the GAM-77 attached. Flutter tests proved, as predicted by wind tunnel findings, that the airplane was safe from flutter throughout its weight and speed range. Modification of the airplane escape system was evaluated under several flight conditions. Findings indicated that crew members have been given a greater margin of safety than ever before. This is especially true under low-level conditions. Several seat firings were conducted during the year at the Edwards Air Force Base range. An anthropometric dummy, clothed and equipped similar to a regular crew member, was ejected at altitudes of approximately 800 and 14,000 feet. During preliminary testing, changes were made to provide maximum reliability of all ejection seat components. Early in the year, an altitude record for the B-52 was set when the H prototype airplane, powered by the turbofan engines, exceeded 60,000 feet at a gross weight of 188,000 pounds. Though known for its superior performance at altitudes above 50,000 feet, the B-52 also underwent extensive testing to investigate its low-level capabilities. To meet a demonstration requirement, both a G and a D model of the missile bomber successfully flew a VFR low-level mission profile on 2 separate occasions. The course, originating from Wink, Texas, extended through 6 states, over 1,019 miles, ending in Chadron, Nebraska. The mission profiles were flown at an average altitude of 500 feet and at speeds which averaged over 400 knots for the entire flight. Further flight testing of the terrain avoidance radar was accomplished throughout the year. During this program, low-level flying has been demonstrated under instrument flight conditions, solely with reference to the terrain avoidance radar and normal flight instruments. One flight was made under these conditions for a distance of 1,000 nautical miles at an average altitude above the terrain of 750 feet and at an average airspeed of 300 knots. Tied directly to low-altitude flight tests is the operation of a Boeing-designed and built low-level flight simulator. The simulator has provided invaluable data, particularly in connection with the implementation of the terrain avoidance radar used in low-level flights. Simulated flights have enabled human factors engineers to evaluate suitability of instrumentation arrangement and determine how well the pilot performs with terrain avoidance radar while flying under simulated low-altitude conditions. Continued peak performance of the B-52 would not be possible were it not for the success of its major support groups and activities. With the addition of 2 on-site locations, one at Biggs Air Force Base, the other at Barksdale Air Force Base, modification and maintenance activity was expanded to 11 sky-speed bases. Provisions for both the GAM-72 and the GAM-77 were installed at depot level and sky-speed bases in a 2-pronged effort to improve the missile-carrying potential of the SAC fleet as quickly as possible. The sky-speed program has continued to prove its merit as the best means of swiftly updating all models of the B-52 as each new improvement is developed. In addition to the sustained sky-speed efforts to update the fleet, Project Turnkey was initiated at Wichita to handle the largest major revision of any B-52 model. The in-plant modification program accompanies a similar effort being conducted at both Sama and Okama. 66 E-model airplanes will be modified at Wichita to increase their capacity for low-level penetration and carrying of the GAM-72 and GAM-77 missiles. As in all airplane model changes, numerous items of ground support equipment are required for maintenance and modification activity. For example, this QEC test stand was developed for testing of replacement turbofan engines. The new stand permits thorough testing and calibration of an engine, complete with accessories, before it is installed on the airplane. Previous test stands did not allow testing of engines in a complete QEC configuration. The QEC test stand would allow SAC crews to have a supply of fully tested engines on hand at all times and eliminates using airplanes for engine test beds. Should trouble develop in an engine, it could be replaced with an engine already checked out for flight. Manufacturing continued its progress in the vital area of research and development of new processes. Among the most significant was the development of the shear, or the flow turning process. It further extends manufacturing capabilities for the forming of one-piece unwelded parts, difficult shapes, such as cones, tubes, and spheres. The use of this process provides consistent production of close tolerance parts at reduced part cost. The die forming of radomes was another process developed to solve a specific manufacturing problem. The problem in this case was to find a mechanical method of producing void-free, high-temperature radomes. The absence of voids in radomes not only helps deter delamination of the layers, but also means that the part's electrical properties are improved. Die forming of this part has meant an extension of previous design limitations, enabling the production of previously difficult shapes with a significant reduction of man-hours. Before the development of the process which produced this spiral antenna, existent manufacturing techniques were unable to approach the theoretical electrical properties of such a design. Tape-controlled milling produced the part from a theoretical equation, thereby eliminating the need for dimensioning. Another support activity of the new H model included the Air Force Factory Special Training Program. Over 425 Air Force personnel this year have undergone extensive electronics and mechanical systems maintenance training at the Wichita Division. In addition to the normal in-plant training of company personnel, instructors were called upon for the first time to conduct and supervise training in the field. Training sessions to handle the rework of the B-52 fuel quantity system and installation of wing kits were conducted on-site at all Skyspeed bases by Wichita instructors whose specialized knowledge made immediate training available. The history of events and activities of the B-52 in the year 1960 gives strong evidence that the manned, long-range missile bomber, more than ever before, has a vital role in the Air Force concept of military strategy. It is a proved operational weapon capable of weathering an attack and retaliating selectively and decisively against any enemy.
Washing a B-52 is no ordinary job. There are 17,436 square feet to cover on the outside alone, and that's equivalent to approximately 64 automobiles. Within just a few hours after the airplane reached the modification position where it would remain for the entire period of rework, the area had become a beehive of activity. One crew removed the 8 jet engines. Another began dismantling control surfaces. The landing gears were removed. The B-52 was beginning to lose its identity, but there was a sound purpose behind it all. This was the first time this new bomber was to undergo such extensive and thorough maintenance. The first opportunity to get beneath the surface and find out how it was holding up after 686 hours of the most strenuous flying possible. Before this airplane is ready for redelivery, 119 changes will have been accomplished and 509 technical orders complied with, requiring approximately 3,500 separate jobs. Probably the most extensive single modification to be incorporated is the major change in the B-52 wing trailing edge structure. This change replaces the conventional structure with bonded panels and honeycomb construction to eliminate deterioration of the trailing edge as a result of sonic vibrations produced during full power engine runup, a condition which becomes extremely critical when water injection is employed. Bomber came to Boeing Wichita in 1956 with the assignment for design and development of a new wing as part of the B-52 Model Improvement Program. Constructed of extruded panels embodying an integrated stiffener, this new configuration will become a self-contained fuel tank, or in the vernacular, a wet wing, eliminating the self-sealing cells presently used. Panels measuring some 80 feet in length are the largest single extrusion ever produced. Mock-ups such as this, representing a section of the new wing, were used extensively for engineering evaluation and testing to determine the feasibility of the new design. In simple terms, the new wing will provide a greater area for fuel storage and at the same time effect a notable weight reduction. Both factors will result in increased range and performance for the B-52. The installation in 1956 of this 100,000-pound Boeing-developed fatigue testing machine marked another step toward increasing versatility in the Wichita engineering test facilities. Greater versatility also was achieved in electronic computing. A year ago, the Boeing analog computer, an electronic flight simulator, looked like this. Today, after extensive rework and modernization by Boeing Wichita Engineering, a vastly improved system is available for electronically solving many complex flight problems on both B-52 and B-47 airplanes. The new design incorporates an automatic potentiometer readout system and a unique hold condition which permits the freezing of a problem in the computer for any desired length of time. A centralized computer console from which all problems can be controlled and monitored. And a complete patchboard system which allows problems to be patched up in 30 to 45 minutes compared to weeks and months required on the old computer. All these features add up to one thing: greatly increased utility and 8 times greater computer accuracy. Amid all this activity, coincident with the beginning of a new production era, an equally colorful era was coming to an end. On August 20th, 1956, the last B-47 was rolled from final assembly at the Wichita plant. This, the 1,390th of these medium bombers, symbolized a production program so efficient and so well organized and integrated that a record of 59 consecutive months of B-47 on-schedule delivery was established. When the Air Force took delivery of the unit number 1,390, the Wichita B-47 production program was officially at an end. By no means, however, did the B-47 disappear from the flight lines or the factory. Since 1952, Boeing Wichita had been entrusted with full design responsibility for the B-47. At the beginning of 1956, Project Crossbow was approaching the flight test phase after months of design investigation and feasibility studies in the wind tunnel, and flutter testing with both the B-47 model and the actual Crossbow airplane. Before the B-47's missile carrier capability could be conclusively proved, however, many hours of testing in the air would be necessary. To determine the performance characteristics and operating limits of the modified bomber, proof testing throughout speed ranges up to maximum safe operating speed, and at various altitudes and airplane attitudes, had to be accomplished. During these flight tests, longitudinal stability of the airplane during high altitude, high Mach number flight, and during low altitude, gear down flight was evaluated. Data was obtained to determine the drag associated with various Crossbow missile configurations. In-flight flutter analyses were conducted to establish airplane missile placard airspeeds. And finally, Actual missile drops were made to ensure satisfactory separation and trajectory of the weapons at anticipated speeds and altitudes. During all these and many other phases of the Crossbow flight test program, the B-47 maintained satisfactory performance, with no indication of adverse effects resulting from the structural changes that had been made, or the added mass being carried. Crossbow was proving beyond any doubt the versatility of the B-47 in adapting to many special purpose configurations. By December 1956, the engineering and modification of two B-47E gravity bombers to a DB-47 director bomber configuration had been completed. These planes will be used for Air Force evaluation and suitability testing in the capacity of carrier vehicle for the Bell GAM-63 guided missile. Meanwhile, modifications required to convert 30 more B-47s to the DB configuration were being worked along with Project Epitome, the regular B-47 modernization and Iran program. Current planning calls for 25 of these bombers to be fitted with the required DB-47 equipment, which is then removed and shipped to an Air Force storage depot for installation at a future date. These airplanes themselves are then delivered to the Air Force in the B-47E or gravity bomber configuration. Actual launchings of the GAM-63 Rascal from a DB-47 configuration airplane were conducted during the year to evaluate the ability of control equipment to guide the missile to its target. Early in 1956, 15 RB-47E airplanes had been modified and delivered to the Air Force as RB-47K models, incorporating special equipment for electronically gathering and recording weather data. These airplanes will be used to collect weather information vital to the successful planning and culmination of hundreds of B-47 and B-52 global training missions, flown daily by the Strategic Air Command. As the B-47 continued to prove its mettle, other modification possibilities were under investigation, with the addition of two ECM pods suspended from the fuselage. The basic B-47 configuration became a prototype external ECM pod aircraft. These external pods will have provisions for carrying either ECM or chaff dispensing equipment. The design, construction, installation, ground, and flight testing of this prototype were accomplished at Boeing Wichita as one of the major B-47 programs in 1956. In the wind tunnel, still another version of the B-47 was being readied for its first flight, to provide information required in the development of a prototype high-speed, high-altitude tactical tanker from a B-47E airplane. Basic modifications in this instance will include an additional bomb bay tank for increased fuel loading capacity, and the enlargement of wingtip tanks to accommodate refueling equipment consisting of a 155 horsepower air turbine, the independent hydraulic system which it powers, and which in turn will drive the refueling reel and fuel transfer pump. With an operating range covering a 1,000-mile radius, the tanker version of the B-47, designated the KB-47, will be equipped to formate with two fighter aircraft simultaneously, and will be capable of offloading a maximum of 50,000 pounds of fuel at the rate of 600 gallons per minute from each wing tank. Other than the KC-135, the KB-47 will be the only other airplane capable of fulfilling refueling requirements of the Tactical Air Command's Century Series fighters. In 1956, Boeing's long-standing policy of encouraging and subsidizing individual inventiveness once again justified itself. Working with a collection of test tubes, beakers, copper tubing, and this specially built vacuum still, 3 chemists from the Engineering Research and Development section were able to solve the problem of radome deterioration due to high temperatures. The solution was in the development of a high-temperature laminating resin, capable of withstanding extreme ram temperature increases due to high speed. This new laminate is not only usable in the fabrication of supersonic aircraft radomes, but ideally suitable for missile warheads and for potting or enclosing critical electronic components in the high-speed aircraft. The year was further notable by the installation and operation of Boeing Wichita's first supersonic wind tunnel. Installed primarily to support research and development on high-speed air inlets for jet engines, this tunnel will become a permanent facility for future model investigation and associated boundary layer research. The tunnel will handle models up to 4 inches in diameter and will attain speeds up to Mach 3 in its present configuration. With slight modifications, this speed can be increased to Mach 4, and a future major revision is being planned to bring air velocity up to Mach 6. In conjunction with tunnel operations, all test runs are covered with high-speed Schlieren movies employing an optical system for photographing normally invisible shock and expansion waves. Movies of this type permit an analysis of airflow patterns around the test model. Late in 1956, Field Service Engineering ordered the first in a series of hundreds of photographs, which will be used as the basis of a complete revision to the B-47E, RB-47E, and RB-47H maintenance handbook. Through stop-action photographs of actual work in progress, the new handbook will greatly simplify maintenance information by pictorially presenting a step-by-step sequence of operations presenting the easiest and best methods of performing all major maintenance on the B-47 model and RB-47 model airplanes. By this simplified approach to maintenance, the Air Force will realize better maintenance in a shorter period of time, with fewer and less qualified personnel. During the 12-month period of 1956, Boeing and Air Force crews logged a total of 3,544 hours aloft, performing production and experimental flight tests on the B-52 and B-47 multi-jet bombers. These hours, representing a total of 1,905 flights, were spent in meticulously checking out systems and equipment, analyzing performance, airplane stability, all essential to the ultimate delivery of a high-quality, dependable aircraft of the latest configuration. An additional 506 flights requiring 1,144 hours were flown by support aircraft, such as the Boeing KC-97 Stratotanker, that completed 79 aerial refueling contacts to keep the mighty bombers in the air. Altogether, more than 2 million miles were flown, or a distance equivalent to 85 flights around the world. In review, 1956 at Boeing Wichita has presented a picture of intense activity and indisputable progress. But such activity and progress is by no means unique. 1956 was a typical year, with typical problems and typical solutions, little different from many other years in the long and colorful history of the Boeing Airplane Company. What took place in 1956 is representative of Boeing's constant and relentless drive to keep abreast of the latest advancements in the state of the art. Representative of man's insatiable thirst for knowledge as he directs his tireless efforts to lay bare the scientific fundamentals that permit men to fly higher and faster, and to pinpoint a target miles below and outside the range of his own vision. Representative of the years of constant progress that have culminated in a fighting team second to none, the B-47 medium bomber and the B-52 global bomber, first line of defense in the Strategic Air Command.
Aviation, the art of aeronautics, began with the dreamers, inventors, and daredevils who dared to defy gravity. The journey of aviation was nurtured by pioneers like the Wright brothers, whose first flight marked a historic milestone. The role of aircrafts in world wars was groundbreaking, dramatically changing warfare strategies. This initiated a technological evolution in aviation, transforming the simplistic wings of a biplane into the thunderous roar of jet engines. Let's journey through the ages of aviation. Behind every great aircraft, there were great minds. These visionaries, like Sir Frank Whittle, the innovator of the turbojet engine, redefined air travel. Then there's Skunkworks' Kelly Johnson, the genius behind the SR-71 Blackbird. His designs combined speed, stealth and power, crafting machines that dominated the heavens. The contributions of these pioneers have left an indelible mark on the canvas of aviation, shaping the course of history and inspiring generations of engineers and aviators. Each epoch in aviation history gave birth to extraordinary aircrafts, each with their own unique features and roles. The Lockheed SR-71 Blackbird was a marvel of speed and stealth. The F-105 Thunderchief, a supersonic fighter bomber, was vital in the Vietnam War. The P-51 Mustang, a long-range fighter, was critical in World War II. The P-47 Thunderbolt, a heavyweight fighter, was used extensively in the same war. The A-10 Thunderbolt II, the Warthog, is a close air support icon. The Messerschmitt Me-262 marked a leap forward in aviation technology. Each of these game changers were instrumental in their eras, and their legacies still resonate today. Beyond the game changers, there are those that have transcended their practical roles to become icons. The Concorde was not just an aircraft, it was a supersonic symbol of luxury and speed. The B-52 Stratofortress, a strategic bomber, is an icon of power and resilience. These magnificent machines and others like them have become much more than just aircrafts. They are enduring icons that encapsulate the audacious spirit, the relentless innovation, and the boundless ambition that define the world of aviation. For more amazing aerial footage, and to join us in this incredible journey, check out the DroneScapes YouTube channel.
If you enjoyed this video, please remember to like and subscribe. And as always, thank you for watching.